हाँ हाँ मैं। 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 हाँ हाँ मैं।
Good morning, Professor David. We are
there. Okay. Good morning.
very soon we are going to start our session.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you see me okay?
Yes, sir.
Hello, Balramji.
Okay, thank you. I was
Morning.
muted. Thank you. David, I hope you're doing well.
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Are you in India or are you in Massachusetts?
Well, I just consider India is everywhere. So even if I'm in Massachusetts,
There you go.
I'm in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
But leaving for India day after.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Your surgery coming up?
Oh, I had it. I had it on
Oh.
Friday.
Oh, okay. And how are you feeling? Well, it seems.
Yeah, it was successful. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Excellent, excellent.
Good morning, Professor Balram. Can we start the session?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. A very good morning to all of you. Myself, Dr. Lumi, on behalf of organizing committee, I welcome you all on second day of 4th Annual International Conference Equinox 2024. The technical session 4 includes talk about history and philosophy of science. The session is chaired by Professor Balram Singh and the talk by Professor David Shroff. Now, it's my honor to introduce Professor Balram Singh. Professor Balram Singh is Director of Botulinum Research Center. Sir is President of Institute of Advanced Science, Dartmouth, USA. He is also Chairman of Boston Center of Excellence for Health and Human Development. Sir is also adjunct faculty in many universities like MIT University, Pondicherry University, and Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is also associate editor in many journals, including Biochemical and Biophysical Research Reports, Ayurveda Journal of Health, International Journal of Indian Culture and Business Management, and the editor-in-chief of Vedic Waves. Sir has published approx 400 articles and 16 books. Sir research includes biophysical chemistry, biotechnology, protein chemistry, research on botulinum and tetanus neurotoxins, vaccine, antidotes, drug discovery, and also on yoga, mind, and consciousness. Dr. Singh's other recognition include over 100 honors and the awards. Among these, I am mentioning few of them like Chancellor Innovative Teaching Award, UMass Dartmouth, Scholar of the Year Award, Oberoi Foundation Award of Exemplary Scholarly Article. Dr. Singh also has been invited speaker to over 450 seminar and presentation. Sir, today on this special occasion, Teachers' Day, we are privileged to be with such a distinguished professor. Once again, welcome and thank you, sir, to accepting our invitation. Now I
Thank you.
request Professor Balram to talk about the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Looney. It is a great opportunity for me and the speakers today. Especially I and David are doing the midnight oil burning to be with you, which means really we are highly dedicated to be part of this, the history and philosophy of science. It's a very interesting and probably reawakening topic. Very, very important, because as you know, in India, we believe that everything, there is a circle of life and there is a circle of everything. So as you will see this discussion with these two noted speakers, that when we talk about history, is what we really have observed. Maybe we have observed in terms of attacks and wars or whatever, that defined history. There is so much science involved in it. And especially even though we think that science is more Western and philosophy is more Eastern, but actually they both intermingle in everywhere all over the world. And in the true science, true academic world, it started even the West. Of course, in India, it has been there a very long time, has not been understood. Even today, it's not been understood. I think David Sarf is going to be an exception, who is going to talk about the consciousness, and he will see. I've not really looked at his real presentation other than what I've seen in the abstract, but I know him well. That he will be the right person to connect East and West and with philosophy and science, to the extent that there is future when you have the philosophy and science. And the philosophy that we know today is really was one of the basic founders of Western philosophy was Socrates. And he was really a kind of scientist educator. He believed in practical things. I think our second speaker is going to be talking about democracy. And we will find that Socrates actually was against democracy. What we consider today as a democracy and democracy of science, you will see that he believed that democracy means, a kind of a crowd. And then they make some decisions, which is not as scientific. If you really think of Ayurveda, for example, it doesn't believe in, even though I think modern science takes the view of doing clinical trials on people, the n number of people, doing statistics and things of that nature. But really, the real science, if you really want to know, is the self-science and knowing yourself. So there is the intermingling of the philosophy and science. And when you really study the history of it, you will find that there have been conflicts, not necessarily between philosophers and scientists, because actually even today we get PhDs, everybody gets Doctor of Philosophy, even though we are scientists or not. And so it's not as much as that as the so-called religious groups who have their own view of looking at things many times. Although it's even religious traditions, almost everywhere in the world I have seen, is based on some kind of scientific understanding, but then they kind of ignore. Science is one thing that tries to allow people to question and advance, innovate, renovate, read through the logical thinking and then practical operations, and then move it along. So, I mean, this topic that you put in this year's Equinox 2024, I think really very deep, other topics also. I did watch part of the inaugural session yesterday. is wonderful. And then from genome to ohm book is kind of matches with that idea. But I think the session that we have, this one on the history and philosophy of science, I think it is something that is still, the philosophy is being developed and history is being made. I taught a course called Chemistry of the Mind. If you just want to see the mixture of it, Chemistry of the Mind, which is a graduate level course at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, when I was at that institution for 25 years or so. And the idea, and I will just end with this because I really want to hear these very worthwhile speakers and their views. How it got approved is an interesting story, and it's very short, but nevertheless very sharp. And it was that when I talked to the head of my division, biochemistry, that I want to teach chemistry of the mind, and his name was Don Smith. And Don Smith said to me that, well, no, this is really not a subject of first chemistry. It is more like a philosophy or psychology, not really chemistry. You know, the chemists in general claim to be the central science. American Chemical Society's tagline is chemistry is a central science. So I told Don, I remember just standing in front of the office. I said, Don, don't you think that if anything exists, we should study the chemistry of it? And he said, of course. And I said, Don, do you have mind? And he took about 15 seconds to answer that question. That did he have mind? Because he knew where I was going with it. And then after a while, he said, yes, I do have mind. I said, do you think I have mind? And he said, he also took a little bit of time, but much less, maybe 2-3 seconds. So, and I asked, Don, do you know anybody who doesn't have mind? And he thought about for a while. I see he said, no. I said, that means mind exists. He said, yes. And I said, that means we should study chemistry of it. And that was like 5-minute interaction, and chemistry of mind was approved. Otherwise, nowhere in the world that has been approved, such a course has been approved, that just talks about the science that we think and the mind that we have. And the mind is the one which creates philosophy as well as history, because we have perspective on these things. So I think we are going to look forward to this wonderful presenters today. And I'm going to introduce the first speaker. I have been mentioning to his name, Dr. David Sarf. Is a professor and chair of physics department at Maharishi University, International University. I've been there and I've seen his lab. Holding a PhD from Johns Hopkins, his distinguished academic career includes faculty roles in philosophy, physics, as you can see, mathematics, at the University of Rochester, Northeastern University, and Wentworth Institute of Technology. Dr. Sarf's research distinctively merges cutting-edge advancements in quantum field theory with the fundamental principle that consciousness is primary, drawing foundational principles drawing significant insights from the ancient Vedic tradition. Like I was saying, he's the right person. His work challenges and seeks to redefine conventional notions of space, time, and matter and causality within the consciousness-based paradigm. Currently, as the core principal investigator at MIU's Dark Matter, which is where I visited his lab, research project, Dr. Sarf's exploring the limits of material dimensions of the universe. And he is going to talk today to us about physics and consciousness. So, David, take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Balaram. Should I put up a PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. If you have, that will help.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they can give you permission.
Yeah. Okay. Oops. And
We can see it.
now let's see if I slideshow
Slideshow, yeah.
from the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So, as Balram said, I'm from Maharishi International University, and that's in Iowa. It's right in the middle of the United States, and I hope everybody who's listening will come and visit us. And I would like to, in this presentation, I would like to explain what's distinctive about our scientific work at Maharishi International University. And we are in the process of setting up an Institute for Physics Consciousness in Veda. And I will try to explain why we think that's essential and why mainstream physics departments could benefit from some of the insights that we have. Now, the founder of Maharishi International University was a Vedic scholar and sage, and he was actually a physicist himself. His name was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he wrote that the discovery of the field of this one basis of material existence will mark the ultimate achievement in the history of development of physical science. So what he is saying is that the material domain, as it's ordinarily understood, is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there is much, much more to be discovered, and the ultimate achievement in the history of the development of physical science will be to discover the field at the basis. This will serve to turn the world of physical science to the science of mental phenomena. Theories of mind, intellect, and ego will supersede the findings of physical science. At the ultimate or the extreme limit of investigation into the nature of reality in the field of the mind will eventually be located the state of pure consciousness. And I put in some slides here, especially for Balram, because I want to convince him that the field at the basis of both mind and the physical world is rightly called a field of consciousness. Now, in the Vedic tradition, the chariot represents the body, and the driver is the intellect, the reins are the mind, and the horses are the senses. This is from the Katha Upanishad. And in Western philosophy too, this is Plato, the chariot metaphor is a familiar representation of the non-reductive relationship between soul and body. In his dialogue Phaedrus, Plato, through the voice of Socrates, uses the chariot to represent the body, pulled by, in Plato's case, just two horses, symbolizing the passions. One horse represents the noble, high-minded passions, while the other symbolizes the coarse, selfish ones. The soul, represented by the driver, is responsible for keeping the base passions in check, just as the driver has to keep the unruly horse in check in order to guide one's life successfully to enlightenment. This non-reductive conception in which the soul utilizes the body is in sharp contrast to the currently prevailing materialist paradigm in which the soul is a passive byproduct of neurochemical processes in the brain. Another way to think of it, there's this gadget which was put on the planet Mars. It's called the Mars Curiosity rover. And you can imagine Martian scientists coming along and finding this rover and looking at the hardware and the computer that seems to be its brain and thinking, well, this is it. This is the material stuff. That's all there is. How would they know that it is actually being controlled by signals sent from the NASA headquarters in a planet a million miles away. Similarly, scientists analyzing the brain might think that's all there is to the story. But the fact is that, and the Vedic scholars, we have to give credit where credit is due, although this understanding is prevalent in Western philosophy too, but it is much richer in the Vedic tradition. The material domain is a small fraction of our consciousness, just like the tip of the iceberg. That's all that we see above the water, but there is much, much more to it that is subtler than that we haven't yet discovered. The layers of this subtle domain, the Taittiriya Upanishad, gives a very nice outline of these subtle layers, the 5 sheaths surrounding Atma, or pure consciousness. And the grossest level is Annamaya Kosha, which is the gross physical body. And then Prana is the life force. Prana, and I'd like to say a word about Prana and biophysics, because so much attention has been given to high energy physics in the physics realm, in advanced physics. We're teaching a quantum field theory course now, and it's all about particle physics. And I think the understanding of quantum field theory is a rich and important subject. And what science has discovered with high energy physics is very relevant to these deeper levels of reality. But I think that the high energy accelerators are almost at the end of their usefulness. They're getting less and less return in terms of new discoveries, and the expense is becoming exorbitant to get the particles. They're already going 99.99999% the speed of light. And they can get them to go faster if they have a bigger accelerator, but it's going to cost not just another billion, it's going to cost another 20 billion. And I, in fact, think that is not where the most important breakthroughs are going to come in the future of advanced physics. And I'll try to outline why I think biophysics has been underestimated, because biophysics is the domain of where prana is. Prana is the life force. That's what it gives the intelligence to the body. It's what is the basis of complementary modes of healing. Ayurveda is a deep understanding of prana. And then there's Manamaya Kosha, which is the mind, and Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the intellect, the sharpest, most intuitive capacity of the mind, and Anandamaya Kosha, which is the ego or the bliss. If you have a healthy ego and self-respect and not a narcissist, but healthy self-respect, then this is a source of bliss, and it's healthy on the way to enlightenment, full enlightenment. Now, Maharishi Technology of the Unified Field is also called Transcendental Meditation Program. Probably you've heard of it. And this allows the mind to go deeper, and transcend means go beyond the surface activity of the mind to more subtle levels. And there's a similar going towards subtler levels in physics. existence is found in layers. At the surface level, there's the electromagnetic force, the weak force, the strong force, which binds the nucleus of the atom together, and gravity. And there have been successive layers of unification in quantum field theory. These are the successive steps of quantum field theory: electroweak unification, grand unification. And the big question is, can we unite gravity with the other forces of nature? And that seems to be where advanced physics has come to a standstill. And I don't think it's going to move forward until they incorporate the concept of consciousness. Research on the transcendental meditation, or TM technique, shows that subtler levels become accessible. Now, in the 1600s, when modern science was just getting started, the founders of modern science in the West, people like Galileo and René Descartes, made a strategic decision to study the mind or the soul independently of physical reality. And it made sense at the time, because that way they could be free to follow the empirical method without interference from the religious authorities. And not to denigrate the religious authorities, I think part of the chaos that we see in Western civilization today is because so many countries have lost their spiritual roots. So I don't mean to denigrate religion at all, but there was a strategic logic to separating the physical domain from consciousness or mind. And Descartes thought that the mind is not immediately affected by all parts of the body, but only by the brain, or perhaps just by one small part of the brain. Every time this part of the brain is in a given state, it presents the same signals to the mind, even though the other parts of the body may be in a different condition at the time. This is from Descartes' Meditations. And he said, and the activity of the soul consists entirely in the fact that simply by willing something, it brings it about, that the little gland to which it is closely conjoined moves in the manner required to produce the effect corresponding to this desire. So what Descartes was wondering is, how does the mind influence the brain? And he had an admirer. Her name was Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. And she was a young lady at the time, I think only about 19 years old. And she wrote to Descartes and asked the question, if the mind and the body are such distinct substances, how can they interact? Given that the soul of a human being, this is from one of her letters, is only a thinking substance, how can it affect the bodily spirits in order to bring about voluntary actions? For it appears that all determination of movement is produced by the pushing of the thing being moved, by the manner in which it is pushed by that which it moves it, or else by the qualification and figure of the surface of the latter. So she wants an answer to how the mind affects the brain in terms of physics. Pushing and pulling forces. Now, nowadays we have a much more sophisticated view of forces. We talk in terms of the exchange of virtual particles, and quantum field theory has very sophisticated dynamics. But the question emerges, is there a subtle energy that represents the influence of the mind on the body, or prana, on promoting the health of the body? And we at MIU think that there is, and that it's in biophysics that the real breakthroughs are going to be made in advanced physics. Now, this one I am addressing specifically to my old friend Balram. This is from Maharishi. The mind in samadhi, or what we in the West call transcendental consciousness, does not get extinct. When you transcend, consciousness doesn't go away. It's pure consciousness. And here's what Maharishi said. I was thrilled when I read this in Gaudapada's Karika so many years ago, that the mind in samadhi does not get extinct. It expands. Gaudapacharya says in his commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, Pracharasatu Vigaya, the mind in samadhi expands, and thereby he establishes Brahmi consciousness, Brahmi Chaitanya, not a state of transcendence, but a state of expanded awareness, thereby implying the practicality of action and behavior and experience, very thorough and most profound in that state of Brahman consciousness, where the mind is expanded. It doesn't get extinct. It gets expanded. The jiva, that means the individual person, becomes Brahm. It doesn't mean the jiva gets lost and extinct, but it only expands. It's the expansion of individuality, which is desired of the state of Vedanta. Now, I have some more here. Maybe we'll come back to this bit. I don't know how much time I have, but we can come back to where Maharishi talks about evolution beyond Brahman consciousness, where the physiology becomes more refined. It's very interesting what Maharishi was talking about here. But I'll save this for if there are questions, because I don't want to take too much time. But it's very clear that Maharishi thought that there was much more to the mind or the soul than the physical body. It is a highly, here he writes, it is a highly significant point to see good in others. As a matter of fact, no man can be all good or all bad, because human life is the result of a mixture of good and bad. Had it been only good, one would have been in the world of angels, where there is no suffering and where dwells only happiness and joy. So Maharishi saw that there were layers of reality. Some of them were inhabited by more refined beings, angels. And now, what are we going to see? How are we going to have a physics of this subtler domain, the domain that we usually call the domain of first prana, then mind, then intellect, or refined intellect or intuition, and so on, deeper and deeper levels of reality that we know through subtler capacities than just the senses. Well, we're going to see that the pillars of materialism are going to show increasing cracks or anomalies. Space-time, matter, and causation are the pillars of the materialist philosophy of nature. They're what we think of as the material domain, and we're seeing them in quantum physics in entanglement. Entanglement is a huge dilemma. In fact, Einstein, for all his brilliance, was fundamentally a materialist, and he's actually the one who first realized that entanglement was a necessary implication of quantum mechanics. And he called it spooky action at a distance, because particles which have interacted and then are far apart are entangled. That means if you find one in spin up, the other one will be in spin down. They're correlated, and in very precise ways. Now, not everybody knows, I think everybody's heard of entanglement. Not everybody knows that entanglement is across time also, that the past and the future are also entangled. And there's something that some scientists are working on called the delayed choice quantum eraser, and I'm prepared to talk about it if there are questions that want to go deep into it, but it's a little bit involved, so I'll just refer to it now. And then there's others I'll just mention briefly, not even from quantum physics, the radiation reaction force from advanced electromagnetism. You know, when a charged particle accelerates, it radiates off photons, it radiates off energy. And because of Newton's third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, there's a radiation reaction force back on the electron. But the interesting thing is that according to electromagnetism, the particle will start to accelerate before the application of the radiation reaction force. This is one of the anomalies that somehow the particle can feel an effect from the future that hasn't been created yet. Another is the Aharonov-Bohm effect in classical electromagnetism. Some of you may know you can frame all of electromagnetism in terms of Maxwell's equations. And Maxwell's equations are all in terms of the electric and magnetic fields, E and B, they're called, the electromagnetic fields. And you can also frame them in terms of electric and magnetic potentials. And that's actually a simpler way to solve a lot of problems. One of the issues is that there is something called an advanced potential, which involves sending a signal backwards in time. And scientists thought, okay, no big deal. This is just mathematical fancy footwork in terms of potentials. What's physically real is just the electric and magnetic fields. But what Aharonov and Bohm showed in the 1950s, based on applying quantum principles, was that if you have regions of space where the electric and magnetic fields are zero, outside of a solenoid, for example. A solenoid is a tube with a wire wrapped tightly or coiled around it, and the electric and magnetic fields go to zero outside of the solenoid, but the potential will vary. It will be greater on one side and less on the other side. And if you split a beam of light and pass it on both sides of the solenoid and then recombine it, you'll get an interference effect showing that the potential difference is real even when the electric and magnetic fields are zero. Now, philosophers of physics, this is jaw-dropping. This is something that you can't ignore. Now, mainstream scientists, go on to more immediate practical problems, but philosophers of physics realize that there is something, this is pointing to something deep, that space-time, matter, and causation are embedded in a deeper reality. And of course, there's the measurement problem and variations on the many worlds interpretation. We could go into if there are questions in that area. So here's entanglement. You have two particles which are located at a distance and they're perfectly correlated. There may be a shortcut in the fabric of space-time that connects them. Well, here I'll go through the delayed choice quantum eraser if anybody wants to see it. It is worth looking at. And there's experiments showing that presentiment or precognition is built into the physiology, into the biophysics. And here is a study done by a researcher named Dean Radin, where at time t equals 0, a subject is shown either a calm picture or an emotional picture comes up on a computer screen. And meanwhile, the subject has electrodes on the palm of his hand to measure galvanic skin resistance. And the skin resistance goes, the skin resistance is higher when the palm is dry, but if there's any anxiety, then there's a little bit of moisture, and that for an emotional, this effect goes up dramatically if there's an emotional scene. If there's a calm scene, like a nature scene or waterfalls or flowers or sunsets and stuff, then the anxiety goes down, and if it's an emotional picture, it can go up. Now, what's interesting here is you can see that there was already a little bit of divergence before the picture was shown. It's as if the subject didn't know what was coming, but the physiology did. And here we have a group of advanced transcendental meditation meditators. They're called TM. They're practicing the TM cities. And there are group consciousness effects which seem to raise the collective consciousness. So Balaram was talking about democracy. And the problem with democracy is if the collective consciousness is low, you're going to just get mob rule, which was what everybody was afraid of when they first founded democracy. Certainly in the United States, they were very concerned, and they realized that it had to be a pretty spiritually advanced people who could make democracy work. And raising collective consciousness is one way to do that. I can go back on this if we want to. And then there are, in the Maharishi movement, there are technologies for enlivening prana, like the Maharishi gem light therapy. My wife is a Maharishi gem light practitioner. And then I have some slides on what's wrong with materialism, because the materialist thinks he has a simple answer to Descartes' question, or the Princess Elizabeth's question, actually, how can the mind and the brain interact? The materialist thinks, oh, no big deal. There is no mind outside the brain. It's just an offshoot of the brain. It's just a passive byproduct of neurochemical processes in the brain. But materialism is wrong, and in fact, it's very seriously wrong. It's conceptually incoherent. And if there are any questions in that direction, I would be happy to show. Everybody's heard of the hard problem of consciousness, that no matter how good we get in our neuroscience in tracking every single neuronal group in the brain and what it does and what kind of signals it generates and transmits to its neighbors, we still won't have explained why we have subjective experience. That's the hard problem of consciousness, and I maintain that there's an even harder problem of consciousness, which is that cognition would be totally undermined if materialism were true. And if anybody's interested, I will run through that argument. It's not actually that hard, but I think all the great philosophers understood that materialism is not only wrong, but it's conceptually incoherent. So, yeah, materialism is really a bad idea. Here's a guy who thinks it would be a good idea to pick up this cute little baby bear he found in the woods. It's a bad idea. Materialism is like that. Okay, so I'll stop here, and if there are any questions and you want to explore any of these themes, whether it's delayed choice quantum eraser, showing entanglement is across time, or if you want to know why materialism is not only wrong but conceptually incoherent, I'd be delighted to go wherever anybody would like to have the discussion go.
Thanks, David. I think, Dr. Looney, maybe you can coordinate the question. We have about 10 minutes.
Participants who are interested
Can't hear you, Dr. Looney.
interaction and question.
Can you shout, Dr. Looney, can you shout at David? He cannot listen to you.
Thank you, Dr. David. Now am I audible?
A little louder, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
David is a little bit far from me, so that's why he cannot hear you.
Okay, so I request participants to go ahead for the question.
If there are questions, you can raise your hands or write in the chat box. In the meantime, let me ask you a question or maybe a couple of comments while people are still preparing their question, or whenever they are ready, please ask me, I'll set up. David, you just mentioned something about, neuroscience and mind.
Yeah.
One thing that you may or may not be aware of, the mothers have very uncommunicable communication, that they can figure things out about their children.
Absolutely.
And there is one study that I saw was very interesting. It may be between mother and daughter also, but the study was done between mother and son, and in which the mother is able to communicate. Well, the mother has XY chromosome cells in the brain, in her brain. So they were able to see that, and they found two things. One is that those cells are there, and the second thing was that those who had those cells, they had less neurological problems. Interestingly. Now, there is a chemistry behind it. I mean, I know you just talked about biology and physics, so I thought I'll just put some chemistry in it. And and the physics part is that there is I'm sure you're aware of this, there is a neuro mirroring. There is a neuro mirroring that people can mirror, just like you were talking about entanglement. So there is a real entanglement, because it seems that mothers can entangle with their children far away. My mother demonstrated this once when I was in 11th grade. I was very, very sick, and I was away from home by myself. And never before, never after, but my mother sent my uncle, said that there is something wrong. And he sort of next day. So what I'm saying is that there is probably a mechanism, that brain and mind that you're talking about, but this entanglement may be actually very practical rather than just only quantum.
I think so also, yeah.
There was a question, right?
Yes, there are a number of questions in the chat box. The one question is, how might concepts like superposition and entanglement inform our understanding of conscious experience?
Very good question.
It's in the chat box in case you want to see it.
Yeah, very good question. There's one of the, I have a background in both physics and philosophy, and one of the deep philosophy of physics questions is physics seems to focus on localized, repeatable phenomena. I mean, you have to be able to isolate the phenomena to do a controlled experiment, and to do it over and over again and get the same result. And that seems to be an essential part of the scientific method. But consciousness and mind are about values. some things are good, some things are not good, some things we want to bring about, some things we would like to avoid at all costs. We have values, and how do you, in physics, you want to get to things like an electron, where every electron is exactly the same, whereas consciousness is very sensitive to the environment at a particular time that will never be replicated exactly the same way. And people who do research in paranormal phenomena, psi phenomena, run into this. There are striking results that couldn't be by accident, and yet it's very difficult to replicate them because the situation is different. And some of the Vedic technologies like Jyotish, for example, Jyotish astrology, take into consideration the whole configuration of the stars and the planets and the environment. So these are things that need to be thought through carefully, and entanglement is one way that manifests. Everything is entangled with everything else. But for example, when everybody thinks in neuroscience that the brain produces the mind. The brain produces the mind. The truth is, I believe, and if people want to go deeper into this, there's a lot of research that actually supports this, that the brain actually filters out higher consciousness, and then it substitutes a kind of neural network, artificial intelligence almost, a primitive computer to make up for that intuitive capability. And the intuitive capability, Maharishi talked about that a lot, that yes, analytical thinking is important, intellect is important, but deeper is a softer kind of thinking. And in fact, in science, most of the major breakthroughs came in a flash of intuition, intuitive insight. And it's a big issue in philosophy of science, is where the initial hypothesis comes from, as you probably know. So I think there is a lot more to be done on understanding what the relationship of the brain is to cognition and consciousness. And I think it's more complex. It's not a simple productive model. It's more that the brain picks up transmissions from wider consciousness, and that our deeper consciousness is transpersonal, that our individual identity, which we're so attached to. But as we go deeper, the great music, the great art, the great literature, and the great science those are universal values. And by putting your attention on those deeper values, you're bringing up your awareness to a more expanded level, and it's healthy. It brings about progress towards enlightenment. So we make that case to our physics students, that not only are they learning the nuts and bolts of science, but they are also expanding their consciousness. They're growing as human beings.
So I think time is kind of moving along, and there are several questions, David. I would suggest that please respond. There are some very specific questions, so if you can kindly respond in the chat box, that would be very helpful.
Let me
hello, Professor David. This is
yes.
Jyoti here. I couldn't unmute myself at that point. And Namaskar, Balram Singh, sir.
Namaskar.
I just wanted to, sir, Professor David, that was indeed a very fascinating and, very fascinating, because last year only I got, in fact, Professor Balram's about plant and animal consciousness. And
Mhm.
that was the point of time that I was initiated into this topic. And
Mm.
for our students here, as well as, even we who are totally new to this field of sort of consciousness, and I would request that if both of you, could just tell us about a very simple, book that we could start off with to go into this domain.
Hmm. I just before we close, I'd like to draw attention. I put my email address up here. If anybody would like to send a question that wasn't addressed, I'd be happy to communicate either by email, or we could set up a Zoom call at some point. So there are, I'd have to know more in particular which domain you'd like to go into first. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has a couple of books that are extremely relevant to understanding higher states of consciousness. One is called The Science of Being and Art of Living, and the other was his commentary to the Bhagavad Gita. And if you're more interested in the philosophical questions about the problems of materialism, there is a philosopher, the leading philosopher of religion in the West is called, his name is Alvin Plantinga, Plantinga, and he wrote a book called Where the Problem Really Lies, Science, Naturalism, and Religion. And he was arguing that naturalism, which is materialism and atheism combined, has a bigger problem with science than religion does. That there's superficial conflicts if you take religion in a silly way, like in some of the Western religious traditions. People have looked at the Bible and said the earth was created 5,000 years ago. That seems to be in conflict with science. But that's a superficial conflict. There's a deep
There is a very simple book by what is his name? I mean, it's very well known. What is Life? I think the guy who first.
What is Life? Yeah, Erwin Schrödinger.
Erwin Schrödinger.
Yeah.
That very small book gives very fundamental connection between physics and consciousness. Maybe that will be a good, but I also put my email, and maybe you already know my email, but there are several books have come out recently. One of them, I have not read it. I'm a very poor reader. It's called Constants. So it's kind of gives very good sense of what is constant, because that's fixed. I also have written a couple of chapters or articles on consciousness, and I have derived something called consciousness coefficients, which is why I'm trying to read the constants. And there is a difference between constant and coefficients. Coefficient, because everybody is different. I think David was telling earlier that electrons are same. I doubt that. I don't think electrons are the same. But at least he's thinking that we are all very different. Though never before, never after. You are the person. Your voice can never be repeated. Forget about your body. Even they have found in America, the CIA, the intelligence agency in America, they have found out that your walk, the way you walk, is unique. There is never before, never after. So I doubt very much, David, that electrons are the same. I have done some experiments on other molecules like protein molecules, and protein molecules have memory. They kind of have very different, they have done potassium channel, for example, in membrane, and they have, when they do electron micrograph of it, no two potassium channels are the same. So it's only label of be not understanding. Everything is very different and unique. And this is why I think your work of trying to get to very fundamental pranic energy or whatever you're talking about, that it maybe someday will define the dark matter. So
Yeah.
I think this is at that level. I'm so happy that there is so much interest in this. And I think
Yeah.
we should have, I mean, in my opinion, we should have consciousness conference on this,
Yeah.
because consciousness is part of the philosophy that we have, Sankhya philosophy. And I think there is a question in the chat box also, what is the difference between mind and consciousness? So there is this, just a upgradation. Consciousness is like, we call it Chetana. It gets into that, you become like that. You're not thinking about it anymore. You just, naturally it comes to you. So there is so many grades of this, and I think it will be tremendously useful. And like David said, you can get trance, when they say that, in samadhi. I mean, when samadhi is a trance, why is this trance? Because it expands, like you said that, things really expand. Brahm, it comes from Bri dhatu. It means expand. So when you expand yourself beyond you, you get trance. The trance is not that you're just forgetting your body. Actually, it is that you are connecting with everybody else, which is also the definition of yoga. So there's so much really beautiful ideas for physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, science in general, if we just focus on this consciousness. And that, Maharishi International University folks really do very, very beautifully from multiple sources. So I think we should discuss further. Maybe whole conference would be on that.
Yeah.
So I think we have taken about 10 minutes more than what we were supposed to. So we probably want to move along, Dr. Looney.
Yes, there were lots of questions in the chat box, but because of time constraint, we are unable to take all these. I request participants to just mail to Dr. David these questions. And thank you so much, sir. You really enlighten us with your visionary work, interaction of physics and consciousness. Actually, we able to understand the groundbreaking advancement in both physics and our understanding of consciousness. Thank you so much. Now
Namaste.
we can namaste. Now we can invite our next speaker, Dr. Shoma Chaudhary. Lahiri is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology. She has been teaching sociology for nearly 22 years now at undergraduate and postgraduate level in various institutes. So welcome, Dr. Shoma. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Shoma, you are in mute. You can unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, I have unmuted myself. Thank you. Shall I begin, Doctor?
Yes, please. Yes, yes.
Good morning, Dr. Balaram. Good morning, Professor David. And good morning, Dr. Loni Sharma. I am really honored to be given this opportunity to talk to you regarding my work on the people science movement in Kerala and the work that the social movement did during the pandemic. I would like to begin by thanking the principal of my tree college, Dr. Chopra, and especially Dr. Gopi Tripathi, who got in touch with me and asked me to be part of this August gathering. So without much delay, I would like to start my deliberation. Now, this work on the popular science movement was part of my doctoral work. I present a more recent set of ideas which I collected during the pandemic, drawing from the work, drawing from the interviews with activists, and listening to several webinars that were organized by the movement during this period. Now, next slide, please. This particular work tries to look at the relationship between science and democracy. Now, although
the slides are not moving, somebody please check. Yeah, okay, now.
Now, though the relationship between science and democracy is quite old, I'll come to it. The context in which they are being, or they were articulated, or they were being expanded has changed. Now, what I mean by this is that communicating science and scientific ideas and insights of science to the wider public was part of the Enlightenment enterprise of the 18th century. And there was a lot of optimism with, about science and what science could do to improve the lives of human beings. And during the 19th century, a lot of association for the advancement of science and similar bodies were formed in different industrialized nations. In the 20th century, of course, the enthusiasm for science manifested itself in a different manner, in the sense that a generation of scientists who were politically inclined and who had commitments to political activism, tried to explain science to the contemporary man, to the common man, and the benefits that science brought on. However, from the 1970s onwards, the science communication movement in different parts of the world have included scientific communities and even others because they felt that enough of science communication was not being undertaken. Now, this is a different, if we go back to sociological work on the relationship between science and democracy, I'm reminded of Robert Merton, the sociologist, who had said that science and technology would thrive best in a liberal democratic order. And when science would become the guiding principle of democracy, the values of science, the values of organized skepticism would provide society with a way in which a critical mindset could be developed to question and interrogate the dogmas of the church, the economy, and the state. Now, closer home in the subcontinent, science held a different kind of a meaning. Could you kindly go back to the first slide? I'm still talking on the relationship between science and democracy. So the first slide, please. In the subcontinent, science held different kinds of meanings, because it is by learning to question that we adopted science almost as a cultural institution. And subsequently, in our independent nation, the Jawaharlal Nehru went on to talk about affirming scientific temper as a way of building the modern nation state. And thus, a closer connection between state, science, and society was established. Now, the progressive potential of science was realized by the science movements. In India, the context of democratization has been a little different from the West. It is social movements who have worked a lot along with the state to democratize science amongst people, to make people aware of the benefits of science, to bring people in within the ambit of science, and more recently, to contribute to a public understanding of science. Now, this is a little different from the West, because in the West, if you look at the for a long time now, and even more in the recent times, science has been under attack. While on the one hand, there are several right-wing forces who try to discredit modern science, saying that it is something that emerged in the West and therefore it is not applicable or not suitable for our context. On the other side, you have COVID-19 pandemics and many such other pandemics, which try to expect from science quick solutions and quick ways of ameliorating people's health. And there are many areas of human activities and public policies such as agriculture, vaccines, climate policies, healthcare, which are influenced by scientific advancements, but at the same time, many emergencies have brought scientists and science under the scrutiny of people, governments, policymakers, and there is a period of uncertainty that science is undergoing. Now, public understanding of science necessarily aims at improving public trust and legitimacy of science and involving citizens in the process of research, designing in science, in the process of data collection, communication of results, and so on. Now, it is in this context that I talk about the popular science movement in Kerala, which emerged in the 1960s in Kerala with the intention of taking science to the people. At that time, there were not many scientific writings available in the vernacular. So one of the main focus of the people science movement in Kerala, here I talk about the work of the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, was that to translate well-known articles, speeches, sections from science books, etc., and try to publish them in vernacular magazines of the day. Basically, the movement consisted of scientists, school teachers, college teachers, science writers, etc. And they went on to start journals for children as well as for the youth, Shastra Gati and Shastra Keralam. And subsequently, they expanded their areas of intervention. Namely, during the 1970s, the attempt was to intervene in formal education. And in the late 70s, early 80s, it was in the field of ecology and development. The well-known Silent Valley protest was initiated by them. And the protest was successful due to the intervention of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and the hydroelectric project was called off. It would have led to the submergence of vast tracts of tropical rainforests, and which were basically repositories of plant and animal species, and it would have affected the ecological balance in the region. The movement got involved in the literacy movement in the 1980s, along with other groups, to make Kerala literate. And as you all know, and we all know, that Kerala is a highly literate state, and the credit for which goes to not only the science movement, but also many other groups which felt that that a scientifically literate or a literate set of people was a prerequisite for any kind of improvement, whether it is political improvement, democratic improvement, or and so on. Now, one of the major interventions which I which I focused on during my doctoral work, was the People's Planning and the Democratic Decentralization project in the 1990s, because they focused on planning from below, planning to democratize the process of planning itself, such that people at the local level, along with the scientists, political activists, youth, were involved at panchayat level to decide what would be the focus of development in their own region. It was quite a novel practice, but I'm not going into that today. I will talk about specifically, so this is the broader background of the popular science movement. I will talk about the ways in which the people science movement got involved during the pandemic, and go on to talk about what is the achievement of such democratization of science. How does the movement go about doing it? Now, the people science movement found the pandemic to be a very unique opportunity to intervene in Kerala society in myriad ways. Now, at the local level, at the ward level, they were part of what is known as the COVID Jagrata Samiti, whose task was to take note of the number of cases at the local level, to provide affected individuals and families with medicines, as in arrange for it, to educate them with regard to managing themselves during infections, if necessary, provide them with food if the whole family was affected, and the focus was to one of the focus was to sort of coordinate with the panchayat and intervene at the ward level. Another important thrust was to organize awareness campaigns. A lot of them were organized at the local level through the social media, and I'll come to these campaigns a little later, because that is what my focus is going to be. And quite a few people, primarily 4 doctors, who are active members of the Parishad, Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, were members of the State Planning Board, and they advised the government on Kerala government on how to manage the pandemic in the earlier months. And simultaneously, they also reached out to the people. The movement also has integrated rural technology center, which was involved in manufacturing soaps, sanitizers, and supplying it free of cost for public purposes. They sold it to some organizations, but also provided it in public spaces like railway stations, etc., so that the common people could use it. At the organizational level also, there was a lot of preparatory work being undertaken in terms of preparing training materials, training activists to go out and create public understanding, creating a link between health authorities and the people at large. The Parishad even started a call center where people could call seeking services, and they would in turn connect them to these various people who were then providing services within a panchayat. And as part of creating awareness amongst people, a lot of webinars were organized almost every day. Posters were circulated with messages via social media, WhatsApp, Facebook in the vernacular. Latest information from the government at the center would be translated, circulated in order to familiarize people in every district. Now, the medical field was characterized by a lot of uncertainty, as you all know, during this time. On the one hand, people were looking towards the governments for some directions and towards the scientists and doctors for developments that would provide some hope of tiding over the pandemic. Simultaneously, people were also practicing parallel systems of medicine, namely Ayurveda, homeopathy, etc., in their attempt to seek a healthy life. Now, the activists of the movement seemed very worried about the adoption of multiple modes of treatment of the virus without any scientific basis. Additionally, there was a lot of fake information and an overload of information available on different social media platforms. As you all know, this was termed as an infodemic by the World Health Organizations. In March 2020, cow urine, herbs mixed with cow dung, yoga, and homeopathy were falsely espoused as healing solutions to the virus. This message was also circulated by the elected representatives in power, indicative of the official tolerance of the pseudoscience as well as the growing politicization of healthcare. The Ministry of Ayush advocated treatments offered by alternative systems of medicine without any supportive scientific evidence and clinical testing data. The social media was used to spread this information along with the spread of hate messages. In the light of this context, of this above context, which I have just highlighted, the People Science Movement launched its mass communication, conscientization, and education program. Now, I'll take an example of one of the science classes, a couple of science classes, to talk about what were they disseminating. Now, at a mass scale, about 10,000 science classes over 2 months were held across Kerala. And here, issues of primary health care were discussed at the micro level. There was also a simultaneous large-scale training program of educators, which was ongoing, because they required educators to talk to people at the panchayat level to adopt ways which would help them tackle the virus. And also there would be workshops to prepare handbooks, pamphlets, notes on a variety of issues pertaining to health. The slogan that the Parishad adopted was Ek Logam, Ek Arogyam. That means one health for all, health for all. Now, what did the lectures focus on? So the lectures that I heard focused on the issue of the web of life, the relationship between animals, human beings, and its implication for the overall health of the environment and society was emphasized upon. Now, with reference to the context of Kerala, the spread of the Nipah virus and drawing reference of SARS and MERS and the fact that viruses were affecting human bodies because of the widespread destruction of the environment, the growth of wet markets, and generally an increase in the consumption-oriented lives that people lead, were all responsible for the situation that people found themselves in. Additionally, references were made to environmental pollution and its effect on human health. The impact of, Kerala had suffered from due to floods in the recurrent, over the recurrent years before the pandemic. So the impact of climate change, the impact of tsunami, the impact of floods on Kerala, and its effects on the environment were also discussed, and how it jeopardized the lives of the people were made part of the lecture. The reason for the emphasis on environment and health was that the science movement was not only interested in making scientific linkages or providing a theoretical understanding, but also providing an integrated understanding of science and society. These were not merely classes on health, but these were about the political economy of health and about life itself. Further, the idea that in order to meet the challenges of new diseases, so they say this, in fact, in the lecture, they say this, the idea that in order to meet the challenges of the new diseases, it is not that we can rely only on vaccines, but we need also to exchange resources and knowledge beyond, beyond the state, with other countries, with other systems of knowledge, and also kind of an international solidarity is required so that the progress of science can go on. When we are talking of Eka Logam, Eka Arogyam, we have to remember that it is not, they also say this, that it is not enough to talk about only human beings, but also about, we also need to direct our attention to the well-being of all other living beings as well. Development would truly mean that the health of the forests, the health of the rivers, the health of the animals and of the environment and of the human beings are all taken care of. The other thing that the movement emphasizes is that the fact that different institutions at the local level need to work together, namely local libraries. Kerala has a very dense network of libraries, about 11 or 12 libraries per every panchayat. The Purogamana Kala Sahitya Sangam, that's a cultural sort of platform of which has many branches. The role of social movements like that of the Parishad, the role of local self-governments, they need to work in tandem in order to tide over the pandemic. Now, the message that is given is that all these various groups have a role in society, and we need to work for the people. We have to reach out to their minds and shape their minds and hearts so that they would change the way in which people think. This is part of our politics, and this is also part of the broader priority of the social movement now. We need to create knowledge, but we also have to be able to distinguish truth from falsity, right? Now, this I would say is an example of a lecture on during the pandemic, wherein many such lectures were organized, wherein the relationship between science and society, the fact that we need to learn from the people, the fact that we need not only to um, tell them how to manage their lives during a pandemic, but also to go to them and work with them so that they develop a faith in us and they are able to listen to us. And this was the mode of the lectures and the way in which they wanted to approach. Now, what did this democratization of science aim to achieve? The process of so this was a period, I would think, where uh, the scientific developments were assailed by a lot of uncertainties. The work on the mRNA vaccine was on, and as the doctors in the movement or the people in the movement themselves said, that vaccine is not the only answer. So there was a period of uncertainty in science. So the attempt of the KSSP was, through this process of democratization, was to restore a faith in science at the same time, and talk about science in a much more expansive fashion. Expansive in the sense that scientific knowledge is useful. Scientific knowledge has political importance. By adopting the ways of science, we can afford to save lives. So, in this process, they tried to also draw from other kinds of subjects like the history of science, the need for international collaboration, the need for vaccine sort of sharing of knowledge about vaccines, the importance of the history of Kerala, and situating their interventions in the history of Kerala and the role of public action in transforming Kerala, exhorting the citizens to play a role. And these webinars and these talks were attended by many people from within Kerala as well as abroad, the diasporic Malayalis. A large number of people sort of attended these talks and tried to they even asked questions which pertain to their own well-being and health, and ways in which they could address their own confusion, fear, etc., many manifold emotions during the pandemic. So the importance of such initiatives of democratization lies in the fact that the popular science movement is able to convey this understanding that uh, that science is not something which is what is only done in the laboratory, but science has to be open to history, science has to be open to people, science has to be open to politics. Scientific knowledge is political. And also the ecological impact of the way in which we are sort of leading our lives. Now, we cannot afford only to think about ourselves, but also to think about nature, on which we are dependent, and the nature is also in turn dependent on us. So this was the general tenor of the popular science movement with regard to democratization. Now, what it managed to achieve was that it managed to go beyond a very limited and a narrow understanding of science and talk about science in relation to society. But the limitation, as I could see, was of such initiatives was that the involvement of citizens in science, the way in which we see in the West, in say setting the agenda of scientific research, or being involved in the conception of research design, etc., that has not been achieved as yet by a social movement of this stature. So with that, I bring to an end my talk today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Chaudhary. I think you gave a very good social aspect of science, which I think many times people forget. And this gives a very beautiful connections with society, and what you call it democratization. I had misunderstood. Democratization sometimes means everybody is the same, equal, but actually what you suggested is that the people are recognizing the value of science for addressing certain issues as a public, which I think is a very unique, as you said about Kerala. Dr. Looney, do we have any questions? Oh yeah, I already see somebody asking questions. While we are waiting for the questions to appear,
Yes.
let me address. I think what you suggested is more, I mean, obviously historical. Indian Constitution has Article 51A. I think you just may be referring to when you said Jawaharlal Nehru made science as a temper. That says Article 51A, and I think that's the only Indian Constitution that, as far as I know, it talks about this. This is such a beautiful concept and acceptance by people about the scientific ideas. So he says that it will be duty of every citizen of India to develop a scientific temper, which basically means, and as you try to say in very positive way, but even if there is a difference, I think you said there were some religious movement at some point where people invest. Science kind of was at odds with the society, but in Indian Constitution, and thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru and other leaders who were there at that time, they accepted that scientific temper is very important duty of every citizen. And what you are suggesting is an application of that. The question is, has it been more common, like a religious difference? I mean, who cares? I don't give a damn. If my constitution tells me that I can question anybody, I can question anybody, whatever that is, in a very scientific way. I don't mean demeaning way, in a scientific way. Have you seen something like that being applied on the same line that you were talking about the COVID pandemic?
Sir, if I get your question, if I can sort of get your, I don't know whether I've got your question right, but people have been, see, this COVID was also a time when people were suspicious of, there were many conspiracy theories. People were suspicious of, whether China was doing something to us and it's a conspiracy by China, or whether vaccines would really lead to vaccines would reduce our strength, or whether it would really stop COVID from happening. So the people questioned at different levels the developments in science. But you see, science also has to recognize that science and scientists, that there is always a period of uncertainty when it comes to knowledge production. That is something that scientists, if you pardon me, probably don't recognize, because science is supposed to be, talking in terms of certified knowledge. Science is certified knowledge. But you see, there's a there's always a process of internal questioning which goes on. And there is a period of, people don't want to see this period of uncertainty in science, but without this uncertainty, knowledge cannot proceed, cannot develop. Arguments, counter arguments, sort of one step ahead, two steps backward. This is the process through which any kind of knowledge proceeds. So I would think that people have always questioned science, and people are still questioning science, but here the questioning takes very different form. I mean, in the sense that it is always good to question any body of knowledge, because without questioning, developments cannot happen. But when people question from the point of view of religion, say this is not our knowledge, this is given to us from the West, or we should not emulate it the way it is, well, um, that has to be a little, I feel that has to be a little tempered. Or when scientists accept the what the political bosses say, that also has to be a little, um, that has to change. People have to stand up to, say, superstition, or say fake knowledge, or say things which are not scientific, or it is not always not always possible to provide evidence of everything. But people gradually, with using vaccines, I would say that the vaccines could do was, in a limited way, stop people from dying, maybe. uh, but the other side of the vaccine is also being sort of revealed now, in terms of the Covishield vaccine and its after effects, leading to different kinds of either deaths or debilitation. That is also being revealed. So there's a time lag is always there. So when we question science, we have to be a little, um, we have to be careful. Just as scientists also have to be, cannot be esoteric. They cannot be removed from society. They are in society, and they have to explain to people what they are doing and why they are doing. And they also have to learn from people, which many of these doctors kept on saying when they spoke in these lectures, that well, we are giving you lectures, but we also wish to learn from your feedback. So do ask questions, do have certain queries about what do you want to know. Don't hesitate to ask. So I thought that that was a more dialogical way of communicating science during this period.
Wonderful. There is a question on the chat box. How does the concept of democratic science address issues of misinformation and public skepticism in health communication? I think you have addressed part of it, but I mean, that's it. Looks.
Well, they can, I mean, this can be addressed with, education. One of the, broader focus of the movement has been education. Education for all, education from the school level to the highest of levels, and also being, always in search of, say, proper knowledge, in search of authentic knowledge, in search of proper knowledge, in order to sort of weigh the pros and cons. Because in the time of social media, a lot of fake knowledge is being circulated, and also science is also open to misappropriation by different agencies, by the political agencies. So there has to be a way of distinguishing fake knowledge from true knowledge. And here the scientists have to be more oriented to society, have to be more active in society. People have to be more active in ensuring that they bring such fake communication to the knowledge of the scientists, and correct information is brought out. These are some of the ways I think a closer dialogue between, a closer dependence between science and the people, so scientists and the people, is required in such situations, I would think.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. I believe maybe you said somehow that you're talking about Kerala. Maybe if it was in Bihar, it will be different. Maybe if it will be in Kashmir, it may be different. So there is a sense of locality,
Yes.
and that relates to what you were saying. If you are locally integrated, not just scientists need to talk. Scientist needs to be integrated. The science needs to be integrated in the society, which has been the tradition all over the world. I mean, somehow one way or the other.
Yes.
Now we have created this branch of science, and then we think that we are superior in terms of telling everybody. But unless society buys into it, we cannot really progress. We cannot advance. Just to your point, you said that there is uncertainty. Actually, scientists do believe in uncertainty. Uncertainty is the one who drives. Actually, there is a Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty that already drives. So, I mean, science is from my experience as somebody who taught for 14 years chemistry of the mind, I find so much connection that we understand this science also according to our own thinking. Even if not locally, it's like we think that electron goes around the nucleus. But actually, I mean, if David was here, he will tell that it doesn't. It is just a question of quantum appearance and disappearance. But we think because there is an orbital and other things, so we think in our own way. And that's not a bad idea. We understand our way as long as there is the integration between science and scientists and a society when develops this mindset. And my question was really referring to that because in the political and social structure, there is a religion becomes like very, very important. And there you cannot question. If you question, people get offended. So that's not what it should be. If we can create a society where there is an appreciation and there is an integration of science in the society, in the practice of the society, whether they're doing festivals or they're doing fasting. I mean, fasting in India is so common. And somebody got Nobel Prize for telling, if you do fasting, this is what happens to you. I was just telling mothers and kids are so well connected. I mean, in India, Manusmriti says the mothers are 1,000 times more important for education than fathers. And, the fathers are 100 times better than the acharyas. And acharyas are 10 times better than teachers, whatever. So there is so mothers are really 1,000,000 times better than a teacher. And there is a science behind it. But we just need to understand, and not only we means like I'm a father. I not only father, but mother also should understand that they are so important. Like we are professors, so we need to take our responsibility seriously and demonstrate that thing to the society. So scientists need to do also that they do understand what you are talking about, society's needs and integrate themselves into that, and so that the society practices science rather than buys science.
Yes.
So I hope your presentation was very helpful in that direction, and I'm so glad that such a presentation is here, and I hope you will continue to doing this kind of work in India, and maybe it will get out from India, because Indian culture is very different. They do accept, like you were talking about, a lot of things they do accept. They get involved, they get panchayat label and other kind of stuff. So I hope that this really teaches the world as well this kind of scientific sense, and not only in our constitution, which is the unique one, but also the practice of the people is also very unique one, and the people like yourself is so important. I have learned, I mean, I just an anecdote, I learned about social sciences research only because I was on board of trustees of University of Massachusetts 5 campus board of trustees. There was hardly any scientist goes into that. I was the only scientist, and everybody else was English professor or sociology professor, and we had to spend 24 hours together for the meetings. And I learned so much from them. So I learned to appreciate that it's very important. There is a social behavior of molecules, believe it or not. So I now correlate that. And that really helps me to understand some of those stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you, Dr.
Luni.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shoma, for putting light and knowledge on social aspect of science. And I can say that this is actually the untouched part of the science. Being a science people, we also don't know how the people are taking these things. The general people are taking these things. Thank you so much for your enlightened talk. And I request Professor Balram to overall conclude the session.
How much time do you give me for that? I didn't see that. How much time? Couple of minutes?
You
That's
can
what you
go
said?
for, yeah, yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, but I mean, this has really been fascinating. Like I said, history, philosophy, now sociology of science is very important. Simply science basically means knowledge. And I know that we didn't talk much about Ayurveda. Ayurveda is science of life. So as you can see, the science is getting not only in terms of health, but also in terms of our behavior. And there is so much research now done to say that your behavior is responsible for your health. It's not your health is responsible for your behavior. It's the other way around. Centers for Disease Control in America, United States, has concluded that 80% of doctors and hospital visits are because of the stress. And so if you don't have a clear understanding of yourself, your family, your society, your environment, and behave accordingly, then you are going to be stressed and you are going to have medical problem. At least you will, that will be so obvious. So I think ultimately, in my opinion, when we see this, David was talking about Brahm. The Brahm means Brahman, the whole Brahman, the whole universe basically. And in terms of thermodynamics, all of it affects us. We are system. If I'm the system, then rest of you are surrounding, including those who I know or those who I don't know, in terms of human beings or the environment or the molecules or the knowledge or whatever that is going on. It all affects us. And so it starts with us. If we can understand the science of self, which is what consciousness drives, then we can move into the rest, as Dr. Soma Chaudhary talked about, how that we need to connect to the society. And then this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that comes into play. So all these things are really very practical, traditional. India has been a country for at least 60, 70,000 years, at least. And it may be equally more than that, but based on genetics, it says, and the rest of the world has come from India. People think the other way around. Based on genetics, 65,000 years ago, people migrated from Africa to India, and 50,000 years ago, they started migrating from India to the rest. There is a geography, there is a geology, and there is an environment. All that region called something called Ice Age. All that happens, and that's the cause of all this. But the point is that we are connected. We are connected to all the people in the world, just like we are connected in terms of Brahman or in terms of universe, in terms of science, system, and surrounding. So we need to understand science of all that. And even knowing the history will be very, very helpful in the sense like, I mean, I was looking at before I came, I was looking at what is the history of science, how people look at that. India appears, but it's kind of marginalized. So it is so good that Maitreyi College is doing this and bringing this kind of issues. Hopefully this world will understand with the help of people like Dr. David Sarf or Dr. Soma Chaudhary to understand, and many other presentations that I heard at the inaugural session of Genome to Om. I think this is very important. Dr. Looney, you are doing marvelous job. The people like Brototi Roy is doing very good job of putting this thing. Maitreyi College is doing this journal also that comes out. I think all that gives a wonderful ambience for future, especially as long as we can get our students excited, and what they will do, who knows. So I'm looking forward to all those developments in the future, but thank you very much for inviting me to learn more before even I came to that, and learn a lot more after I listened to the two speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We always want to hear you. You always enlighten us with your vast knowledge. And once
also,
again,
I would like to add, thank you so much, and sorry for keeping you awake for such, I mean, very late at night. I know. But
That's
you have
okay.
we always, want you to be there in the conference in some way, either as a speaker or if not as a speaker, at least as a chair. So be connected with you. Thank you, sir.
No, it was my pleasure actually. I don't mind. I think these days young people already have become Nisachar. I think I wrote to you.
Yes.
The people who work in the night, they are Nisachar. So we are competing with them. At least I can talk to them. And I was also up with there, and I still got up at 4 a.m. So, all right. Thank you. Take
Thank you,
care.
sir. Namaskar, sir.
Thank you,
Namaskar.
sir. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thank you, everyone. And very soon we are going to start our next session uh, at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Tejinder, are we keeping the link open now or are we closing it?
Am I audible?
Yes, Tejinder.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Link will be same. So we are going to remain it open.
Okay, so maybe we can just request all the participants to kindly join. At what time are we starting the next session?
At 11 a.m.
At 11. So maybe let's join at 10:45. Oh, it's already 10:50.
It's
10:50.
already 10:50.
Okay. So we'll keep the link open and we can join in another 5 minutes after a short break.
All
Thank
right.
you, Luni. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Madhu. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, Gopi.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Hi, Madhu. The
Yeah.
earlier session finished earlier, so everybody's still very much here. We'll just shortly be starting.
Ah,
Can you hear me? Yeah, we'll just be. हाँ बस शुरू कर रहे हैं अभी.
yeah, but a bit low.
Hi, Neeraj.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello, Neeraj.
Hello.
Hi.
Rashi's joined, Neeraj?
I've been trying to contact her, but not able to contact. She is not picking the call, not responding to the message.
I'll just check. I'll just check.
Yeah, she has joined. She's joined. She's saying I can't hear anything.
Hi, Rashi. Neeraj, उसको बता दो.
She has joined. She's saying I'm unable to switch on the mic or the video.
Maybe
Please make her the co-host.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going
Rashi,
on at
please try now.
11:10, right? Neeraj ji?
Yes, Rashi will take over and then we start.
Okay. So is somebody going to introduce?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
So I can go off
Sorry.
then, right?
No, you just be there. We'll just be about. We just Rashi ka technical problem की वजह से she's not able to join. We're just going to get her in, and Neeraj will start and then hand over to Rashi.
Okay.
There she is. Hi, Rashi.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, good morning. I'm here.
Hi.
Yes, hi, Rashi.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so good to
Yes,
see
we can,
everybody.
Rashi.
Good morning.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us,
Very
Rashi?
low. I don't know why.
One second.
On full
Rashi.
volume. But can you
Can you-
hear me? That's
I
Yes.
can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rashi, we can hear you, and sir, we can also hear you.
yeah, I
But
can.
Madhu, can you hear everybody?
Yes, but it's a bit low. It's on a laptop thing. So maybe because of that.
So yeah, maybe.
I'm not on any speaker.
I have put my volume on full.
ठीक है, that
Okay.
is-
Thanks.
ठीक है. So good to see you, Rashi.
Good to see you, ma'am. Good to see everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, Rashi is in Shillong. She teaches in Neu. She's joined us from Shillong, and she used to
Okay.
be with us earlier.
Okay.
So anyway, Neeraj, hand over to us. Over to you.
So,
Should I start?
Neeraj.
shall we
Neeraj,
start?
when?
We are 10 minutes early.
We are 10 minutes early.
Yeah, it was supposed to start at 11:10.
It's
11 o'clock.
5 past 11 now.
We can start. People will join.
Okay.
You start.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all again in the second session of the second day of Equinox 2024. So today we have two presentations. Unfortunately, one of the presenters is not well, so he has sent his paper to us. So I'll be reading the paper on his behalf, and we'll be doing it in the next half. So for the first half, we have Mr. Madhu. So Rashi will be introducing him, but we also have Rashi. She was a colleague earlier in Maitri College. Now she is there at Nehu. So she knows, she needs no introduction, but just for the sake of formality, Dr. Rashi is currently teaching at the Department of Sociology, Northeastern Hill University, Nehu, Shillong. Prior to joining Nehu, she taught at Christ University, Bangalore, and Maitri College and other colleges affiliated to the University of Delhi, India. She received her doctoral degree in the discipline of sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her research interest includes stand-up comedy, sociology of humor, politics and culture in Northeast India, sociology of gender and urban spaces, sociology of visual culture, and disciplinary practices of sociology and social anthropology. She is the co-editor of Politics of Recognition and Representation in Indian Stand-up Comedy, which is a part of Palgrave Studies in Comedy 2024. She has also edited Punching Up in Stand-up Comedy, Speaking Truth to Power, which has been published by Routledge, and Materiality and Visuality in Northeast India, an Interdisciplinary Perspective, published by Springer, and Social Scientist in South Asia, Personal Narrative, Social Forces and Negotiation, which was published by Routledge in 2021. So and that's a brief introduction about Rashi, and I think Rashi will take it over from here. Over to you, Rashi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neeraj. And thank you to the organizing committee of Equinox to get me for this particular session and asking me to chair this. I hope I do justice to the task that I have been given. Without much delay, I think I'm going to start with our first speaker, Mr. Madhu Ramnath. And if I can just quickly ask the organizers, we have 30 minutes for the talk, right? Or 45?
Rashi, it is 30 minutes for the talk and 10 minutes
Yes.
for interaction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So let me quickly introduce Mr. Madhu Ramnath. So after his formal education in mathematics and philosophy, I think he chose to live in the forest of Bastar in central India for about 30 years. So that's quite a long time. And his entire work that we are going to be hearing today would be taken from his experiences in the region. During his stay there, he focused on the forest, quote unquote, way of life as lived by the Durva and Koitur peoples. And he immersed himself in that world, making the plant world and Adivasi languages his focus. About 10 years into this lifestyle, he realized that Adivasi botany by itself may not allow him to communicate with other botanists, and hence embarked on a study of plant taxonomy in the Hortus Botanicus in Amsterdam and spent time in other herbariums in Europe. Over the last decade, he has been working on a broad range of issues that concern indigenous peoples in India and Southeast Asia. He works with the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program Asia on the interface between indigenous peoples and forest. Mr. Ramnath's present preoccupations concern restoration of degraded landscapes and language. In terms of his talk, his title is Language and Understanding Wild Forest Foods, which, as his abstract suggests, will give us an insight into the ways in which forests are experienced by indigenous peoples. And he further highlights the constraints of deploying, quote unquote, a scientific view, which is purely looking at, which may not do justice to analyze his research world. So I call upon Mr. Madhu to share his work with us today. Is there a technical glitch from his side?
Neeraj, just could check.
Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So you have like 30 minutes. Would you want me to give you a reminder, or will it be okay without the reminder?
Yes, it would be nice to have a reminder. Thanks.
Sure, we'll do that.
Okay.
5 minutes before 30 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm very happy to be in front of you online. Thank the organizer of this Equinox event, the chair, the conveners of the conference, the principal and the coordinators of this particular session, and of course, the students and faculty. So before I start, I'd like to clarify that I've changed my topic a little bit, the title. It was Language in the Understanding of wild forest foods. And I'd like to change it to the understanding of the forest through the procurement of wild forest foods. It's a small change, but it's quite an important change. So at the outset, I'd like to say that much of what I'm speaking is from my own experience, much of it in central India, in the district of Bastar of Chhattisgarh. And I have lived and worked among a community called the Durwa people, which is they live along with the Gonds of central India. They speak a different language, and the language I will refer to in my talk is Durwa. So to start with, the key point here is wild forest foods. And it's good to pause a little bit and see what we mean by wild foods in general, and wild forest foods as foods which are collected in the forest. So wild foods in general are that which is not cultivated, which is harvested from the wild, and which is harvested, processed, cooked, stored, everything directly from the wild. So there is no obvious commerce or cultivation involved in it. And that the forest is a space for many such foods was recognized by the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, sometime in 2013, when there was a very major conference called Forests for Nutrition. And since then, this kind of topic took off, that wild foods as something important became very important they all started to focus a little more on uncultivated foods. Then there are very many nuances in this. There are traditional food crops, uncultivated foods. Then there is a slow food movement which takes off in another direction. So how are wild foods different from cultivated foods? They are first, you don't need to cultivate it, obviously. And where are they found? They are found in all landscapes. Even in the landscapes, you will have uncultivated things you can eat. They are found in wetlands, they are found in dry, rocky areas, they are found in high altitude areas, in desert landscape, everywhere. And since it became popular in more than a decade ago, it has also become a kind of sexy topic where everybody's jumping onto this bandwagon, and it's become fashionable. And there are many claims to it. And the claims being they are superfoods, they are natural, they are of high nutritional values, they have antioxidants, omega-3, and so on. So it's become quite the thing to be doing, working on wild foods or consuming wild foods, which is also the cause of their decline today, the commercialization. So I am using the wild food as a theme and their collection in the understanding of. So forests have been understood traditionally through, say, classical taxonomy, a kind of objective process of understanding landscapes through their ecologies. Much of forest distribution has been sort of either categorized according to the latitudes they are in the world or altitudes. You could have high altitude tropical forests, which are of a different kind. So these are the kind of categories in order to understand forests in general. But my approach is to use the Adivasi, the indigenous way of looking at forests, in particular through their procurement of wild foods, the terms they will. I will come to these terms a little later. So many of these, the wild foods which I mentioned about the value which they have been given today is also validated by scientific categories that they are of high nutrition. They have various vitamins, minerals, and trace elements, and so on. So it is that which validates it. And so in this topic, in this talk, I would like to then come back to how are these wild foods collected. So traditionally, in traditional discourse of anthropology, we talk about hunters and gatherers, which is actually about food, that they hunt for their food or gather their food. Collection is broadly classified as hunting and gathering, also fishing. But here I would like to make a small difference that I am breaking these hunt gathering, these generic terms, into their component parts. So in my experience in Central India and among other indigenous peoples where I've been doing these things, I have come across about 24 verbs. These are action words through which the forest is understood, through which wild foods are collected. So I would like to mention these words. These words will be in the Durva language. I would like you to hear them, and I will explain what they mean. So in the area of gathering, that is mainly to do with plants. To go back again, wild foods can be plant or plants. They can be small game like snakes, lizards, rats. They can be big game like deer, wild boar. Be aquatics like fish and crab, area of wild foods. And of course, honey and many kinds of honey. In India itself, we have about 5 which provide honey and larvae. So collection of that I mentioned, when I'm breaking the generic terms like hunting and gathering into their component parts, I come across about 23 or 24 verbs, action words. And these words, I will mention them in Durva first, and then I will explain them in English. Words, rundaitana, it means to collect, to gather, to put together. Or pedkurana, it's to pick up. Pintana is to snap. When you break a bamboo, you don't cut a bamboo shoot, you break it. There's a shoot and you break it. It's pintana. So kantana is often to do with searching. When you look for fungi in forest leaf litter, you are searching for it. So you don't need to even mention the word of mushroom. You just need to say, I am going to search. When you come into aquatics, one of the things we do to look for crabs under rocks. So you have a stream bed in which there are rocks, and it's under these rocks that the crab usually has a nursery of smaller crabs, also some species of fish. So looking for crabs actually is when you are feeling under these rocks for your game, your crab. And the word for that is oigurana. So when you say, I am going to feel for, it is understood that it's to do with crab and fish. So oigurana is an action word, a very specific action word, which in the context of food collection means feeling under the rocks for crab. Similarly, you can say, I am going to chase. Valitana, chase. Valitana, chase is actually to do with arboreal mammals. That is giant squirrels, monkeys, civets, which travel on the trees, on the canopy, and along climbers which connect one tree to the other. So mammals which travel on the canopy at the tree tops are chased, and that word is valitana. So when you say, I am going to chase, you mean arboreal mammals. It is very different from going to shoot something. That is also includes a chase. But here, when you're talking about wild boar or deer, then you are chasing on land with an arrow, and it's an animal which is running in front of you. So that is Ekarana, which is going to shoot. So for porcupine or nocturnal animals, you usually need to go and wait in their burrows. And that is a very different kind of wait. So that is katana. You are waiting. I am going to wait for porcupine. It means night. It means at the burrow. It means you will wait all night till the porcupine returns to the burrow from wherever it has gone in the day. So all these verbs, I don't want to go into all the 23 verbs and go on. I will keep referring to some of them. There is also bailing when you talk about aquatics. So there is also bailing. There is also when you talk about nets, when you talk about fishing with rods. Those are all having different terms. So coming back to our understanding of the forest, one thing you see is that all these terms are essentially very common terms. They're not technical terms. Only the context is the wild food harvest context. But they are the same terms we use in speech. Unlike when we talk about the scientific understanding of forests and ecology, the terms are different, species names are different, we classify forests into different types, and therefore we have different understanding. And the thrust in the scientific understanding is objectivity. And here, when you go back to understanding a forest through these action words, when another word is a stupefy. You use plant poisons in shallow pools to stupefy certain fish. So that verb is kolorana. We use it only for this particular kind of fishing. So when a forest is understood through these action words, that is, you are feeling under the rocks, you are chasing, you are searching, you are plucking, you are breaking, you are stupefying. You are digging, for example, for rats or for tubers, kotrana. So when you say I'm going to dig, you mean either rats or tubers. So digging and climbing and all these different verbs is the way you interact with the forest, and the intimate kind of suggest a kind of intimacy with your surroundings. That is, you're climbing and doing all these things, searching or whatever. And allow me to just extend this. I have sort of, while one is digging a lot for a and you don't get what kind of dejection. And if you get more than you want, or if you get as much as you expect, there is also elation. Say when you climb up for honey on a cliff or a tree, and you get as much honey as you see or expect from the ground, and you climb up all the way and you get it. And if you get as much as you hope, there is always elation and joy. And if you don't get it, then there is also the opposite. So along with this very physical way of understanding the forest, that is climbing and digging and running and chasing and all that, there is also an emotional counterpart of relation and discipline, that these things together, the emotion and the action, provides a very special way of understanding the forest, which is extremely subjective. Unlike the very objective way of classification, and I mean, you're told all the time to stay away and be objective. So I come down towards the conclusion of this talk, that even though wild foods, forest foods have become quite popular, it has still followed the kind of scientific way of assessment, validation, and so on. But for most people who consume this, and for whom this kind of knowledge is important for their livelihood and for their lifestyle, it is not a kind of superfood which they're eating, then their way of looking at it, which involves both physical intimacy and an emotional counterpart, we could pause somewhere and think about how this way of approaching the forest and understanding landscapes could alter our perception of forest conservation today. I mean, even in the recent report of this week, we are again, maybe 17 lakh hectares of forests have been diverted again. And every year we are losing forests. And sometimes I wonder whether our way of perceiving forests itself alters the way we handle it, the way we manage it, the way we relate to it, not only as communities, but also as state policies and national policies. There is a lack of that intimacy. I'm not judging it in either way. That has its own advantage. So this is more or less what I wanted to share, and we could use the rest of the time for a discussion or whatever we have. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these insightful things that you have got from your field. So before I open it up for discussion, I think I'm going to just give our audience here a quick glimpse into what the kind of issues that he has raised. Let me start with the last one, I think. So till I give a summary, you can write your questions, your comments in the chat box, and I'll take it one by one. And if you're open to speaking it up for our speaker here, just raise your hands, please. So quickly, I think I'm going to go back, start with the last point, specifically in the kind of, the volatile, complex, uncertain kind of world that we live in. He highlighted the major question of how forest conservation and preservation needs to be revisited. And for that revisiting, the context and the concept that he used is the idea of wild foods, specifically found in the forest, which requires us to, one, look at what exactly are wild foods, even if they have scientific validation. And second is to sort of understand what forests themselves are. How do we relate to it and how do we understand it? So in that, the very interaction with the forests by the Adivasis or the indigenous communities that we are looking at has to be understood within the physical and the emotional aspects of it. So a much broader socio-cultural aspect of understanding what forests mean to the people who inhabit those areas and those regions. We have had enough scientific and social scientific studies on it, but there is a certain gap and there is a certain limitation that has been highlighted in the talk. And that's where we need to, probably bring in the idea that there are limitations to disciplinary frameworks, which can be seen as sites of knowledge production, dissemination, reception. And these disciplinary frameworks, specifically with social sciences also, we need to engage with indigenous knowledge systems and the way people experience and interact with their surroundings, specifically their natural surroundings, and open up debates, a more dialogic communication between these spaces and spheres, so that the scholarship within natural and social sciences can be more robust and comprehensive. I think if I have managed to get the points of the talk correctly, if there's anything that I'm missing, of course, we can have it in the interactive session. So we have the first question here. This is by Ms. Shalini. Sir, does the emotion we feel for a certain fruit affect how it impacts, benefits our health?
The emotion we feel for a certain effect or impact our health.
Our health, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's open. I don't know. Is there anyone else who would like to take it up?
Anyone else who would like to pitch in into this conversation? The question is, does the emotion we feel for a certain fruit affect how it impacts, benefits our health? Other questions, please?
I can see a hand up.
There is.
Oh,
okay.
Please
go ahead. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Mr. Shailendra, can you?
I think Tejinder, you need to make them co-host or something.
This option is on.
Okay.
Mr. Shailendra, would you want to pitch in and ask your question?
Yeah, I don't have any question, but just a comment. So I'm not sure what repercussions these foods have on our health as per our preferences or not, but certain food, even wild food, have some ritualistic value, spiritual or ritualistic value. For example, sama in our area, which is eaten on Rishi Panchami, particular day. So there is definitely an emotional and spiritual part attached to that kind of food. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Mr. Madhu, would you want to elaborate on that?
I could barely hear it. And I wonder if it was a question.
No, there wasn't a question. He was just adding on to the point that certain fruits and certain
Yes.
might have.
When I focused on wild food, it is something to bring things together. But there are, just to elaborate a little more, if I have some time, in an average village, say in central India, a common conversation in a village meeting around this topic can throw up around 500 species of wild foods. And the kind of urban poverty of, I mean, a common family in Delhi, even a well-to-do family in Delhi or Bombay, most likely get by with maybe 100 species. वो भी आपका जीरा and masala सब मिला के. So, I mean, even in that tadka, you have about 4 species. I will count it. ठीक है. But imagine 500 species through the year, And imagine that each of them is available, not imagine, it is true, available for a few weeks. And you're extremely alert that I will get that this year. And a conversation in a village could be that, oh, did you have this last year? Did you have this year? Because it's a fleeting thing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Something like bamboo shoots may last about 3 weeks to a month, after which you do not get bamboo shoots for the rest of the year. So this alertness, this constantly being alive to your surroundings so that you have tasted everything. And many of those things contain very, very important minerals, what we in the shop buy as supplements. So my richness, I'm talking about also a society's richness, just because of their forest, in terms of their health, in terms of their nutrition, and unconsciously so. It is not something made into a fad. It is a very natural thing to be eating certain things. And not it is not fashionable either. So the difference from 100 species of what we are eating, if you go to any bazaar, go to buy fruit in any common market, you will only buy those 6 or 10 things, the same 6 or 10 things. And if you test it for nutritional values, for the various vitamins, minerals, and so on, the proximate principles of nutrition, you don't find them very much better than the wilder fruit we eat through the year, which are not sold, which are not even seen, but only allowed to grow. So the common rural or forest-based people get by with their health if the forest is around, if the knowledge is maintained, and they can get by without. So health. So it's just an adding to, yeah. I see a hand up.
Yes, we have two questions, actually one comment and one question in the chat box and one hand up. So I think I'll invite Dr. Brodati to ask her question. Sorry, I didn't recognize your name on the screen. It's
Yeah,
different.
actually, it's my daughter's account from which I've logged in today. Hi, Rashi.
Hi, good to see you.
Hello,
Please
hello,
ask.
Madhu. It was actually a really fascinating, talk, and but all the while, I couldn't help but think that the diversity that you are talking about, right, in terms of the food that the forest people have, and which so much diversity is there. Do you feel at some point that till now because the less of knowledge has helped in maintaining the diversity, because with the anthropocentric outlook that we have, the moment we know about something, we always want to exploit it for our own good. So I would like you to comment on that.
This is something we've been struggling with since we started work on this. I think there are many, many things which are declining. A lot of foods are endangered, especially in the Northeast in recent years. Everything, I mean, I did mention the commercial aspect, which is a threat. But at the same time, forests have never been viewed for the nutrition they provide. Today it's been by climate change. So, but otherwise, as a reforestation project, I mean, we can actually counter things like monocultures, because monoculture plantations, because the recognition that the conference of FAO in 2013 did give a big push that the forest could be recognized like this, recognized for these aspects. And it's not very easy to change food habits among most human people. So this threat is there. I mean, I'm not denying it, but we could play around it. We could plant certain things which are from the wild. Maybe you won't get all the qualities, because one of the things about wild forest foods is that the food itself needs often to be processed, because wild foods contain a lot of toxins which need to be processed to eliminate them. So it's not easy to just go and eat it without knowing what you're doing. So when you bring it into domestication, those kind of toxins are eliminated for many, many years, maybe generations. But certain wild foods, of course, can be directly harvested, eaten, and so on. Something like bamboo, which is not even so exotic. All over the Northeast, bamboo shoots are eaten. But now we're having a problem with people who want bamboo for bamboo craft. They are the ones who are suffering because so much of the shoots are going away. And more urban people are learning to eat it or appreciating it. I don't have an answer, but it's something we have to think about. Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think you're muted.
I think, yes, one of the questions actually pertains to what you just mentioned. It's by Mr. Lucky Sharma, if I'm not wrong. If we now in one way trying to adapt with wild food with low immunity, will it affect our health? Since you said that,
Sorry?
will the wild food will affect our health, especially with low immunity? As you said, some of these wild foods cannot be eaten raw because there's a lot of toxins. So if you could just
Yep.
elaborate on that, because that's the question they're asking.
Yeah. Certain kind of foods, I mean, especially certain families of plant foods, especially what you call aroids. Aroids, it's the family of Zimikand, Arbi, in Hindi, families. These are aroids. And most of these aroids have oxalate crystals, which need to be neutralized. And that's why they give you an itch at the throat. So they usually neutralize by citrus compounds or even tamarind. So they usually add it. That's a very simple way of processing that food. But many yams of the genus Dioscorias all need to be processed, and they can be fatal if you eat it without knowing. So these are toxins which keep wild predators away. The wild boar is not eating it. The porcupine is not eating it. So the plant itself has a toxin to protect itself. And as human beings, we harvest it, process it, and get on with it. So it's a very intelligent way. Many, so there are whole families which have toxic principles. But with, say, game, for example, with meat, there's very little of that. Most meats are eaten, small game, big game, fish, and so on. Insects too. It's a very, very big world of insects as food. There are a lot of publications now in the UN with insects as food. So these don't need so much processing. And they may be the next big superfoods, insect. Yeah, and it's
Okay. There is a comment here by Mr. Anand. It says wild food is no price and low price also. That's why tribal people prefer it. And it's still considered to be only traditional. Is that so? I mean, I don't know if there's a
sorry, I
question
missed the
there or
first
is
part.
that. The first part says that wild food is no price and low price. So probably that's the reason that
Low
tribal
price.
people prefer it. No price for it. It's low price.
Yeah.
Not expensive, really. So that's more like a comment. I don't know if there's a question there. Mr. Anand, would you want to come in if there is a question?
No, madam. I am really learning from Madhuji statements. Okay. I learning from Madhuji statements. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have a question in terms of the diversity bit till we get any more questions. I was thinking, since you talked about the seasonality of certain foods, that, there are so many different kinds of varieties of foods, but they're only available for a month or 2 or 3. So are there also, indigenous techniques of preservation where it could be made available for a longer time? Like mostly when we have seasonal stuff, we try and have some kind of techniques to preserve them so that it could be used later. So did you come across some kind of techniques during your interaction with the Durava community?
Yeah. It's a good point. Lot of foods are stored because they are so fleeting in their appearance and disappearance. So a very common technique is smoking. Smoking, you can smoke fish like you smoke meat and fish. So smoke-dried meats and fish are very common because a lot of the fish is caught during the summer turning into monsoon. When the fish come upstream, that's one time, and when the waters are shallow, that's when you can stupefy fish. And it is very strange when you look at the kind of plant poisons used for stupefying fish. There are very few genera of plants whose roots or fruit are dried and used for stupefying. One of them is derris. And it's used, I don't know how human beings use the same genus in South America, in Africa, and in Asia. Same genus, different species. So using these foods, you get these poison, you get a lot of fish at the same time. So they have to store it. Then a lot of fruit peeled, like mango, for example. Wild mango is peeled and sun-dried, like you make aam papad. Bamboo is again dried, just sun-dried. You can also smoke it. But there is a lot of storing techniques of directly processing, but this is the processing part of the storing. Then you have very tightly woven baskets of dried leaves, again, the leaves are of specific species, and bamboo. And in Southeast Asia, you would go into rattan. That's cane, very fine work of baskets. So, storing, drying, storing, the processing, it's a whole world with its own vocabulary and terminologies. And it's been used since, I would say, Neolithic times.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think two things that I really gained out of that is one, you talked about the transnational connection. So we are not just talking about a small set of people in one region of India, but you're also talking about how there are connections in terms of, let's say in Africa or in other parts of Asia or in Americas. So maybe we can also take that idea that indigenous knowledge systems are not just indigenous in its containment, but also they have parallels across the world. I think we have just time for one more question if anybody has that. Otherwise, I would close this session. Does anybody have any comment, any questions? Like, no? Thank you so much, Mr. Madhu. That was a very insightful session. I think our audience here and everybody who's joined us for today learned quite a lot of things, specifically the questions and the debates that have always been there. How do we really try and bridge the gap between local knowledge and scientific knowledge, or academic and non-academic worlds? It's important that we get such insights, specifically from practitioners like you, and who can give us an insight into the world that we probably have only heard of but haven't really ventured into. So thank you so much for that session, and I'll hand over to Neeraj.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Neeraj. Thank you.
Thank
Neeraj,
you.
would you want to come in, or do I introduce Dr. Pandya right away?
Maybe let's please introduce him and I'll do it.
Okay. So as Neeraj had already mentioned, Professor Vishwajit Pandya could not join us today because of health reasons, but he'll be reading his paper. I would like to introduce Professor Pandya. He's currently the Distinguished Professor of Anthropology in Dhirubhai Ambani Institute of Information Communication Technology in Gujarat. He has previously held positions at Victoria University, Wellington, New Zealand, Westminster College, Fulton, USA, and University of Chicago. He has numerous publications to his credit, mostly trying to look at the theme that we have today, which is that of man, nature, and the relationship between the two. Done his work from anthropological and ethnographic backgrounds. And that's what I think we are going to be seeing in his talk today, which is titled Talking Trees, Silent Forests, Notions of Relationality in the Forest Cosmologies of the Andaman Islands. I believe from his abstract that this is a work based on, it's an ethnographic work based amongst the Ongri and the Jarawa tribal groups in Andaman Islands. In his paper, he highlights the need for anthropologists and anthropological scholarship to revisit some of the debates regarding indigenous lives, their knowledge systems, and their relationship to state and its developmental agenda. So I hand over to Neeraj to read his paper. We can have questions at the end of the session, which I think could be mailed to him. I don't know what's, yeah, so we can mail the questions to him. Whatever anybody here could answer or open up a debate with, we can do that as well. So Neeraj, 30 minutes to you too.
Yeah, so it's a big paper, so I'll try my best to finish it within the time period. So as Rashi has already mentioned, that the paper is about two tribes, Ongi and the Jarawa from the Andaman Island, and it's an ethnographic work. Professor Vishwajit, he has been stayed with these two tribes, and then he has been in contact with them, talking to them, collecting legends, collecting myths from them, and then all those ideas which he gathered from them, he has put forth in this paper. So one of the important things with which he starts is that he has been visiting the Andaman Islands since 1984 as a researcher. So he has been studying the indigenous culture of the Andaman Island. And in the research, in this particular research, his focus has been on sharing his findings and discussing public policy regarding tribal welfare with the officials of the Andaman Nicobar administration. And on several occasions, he mentions that he has the officials of the Andaman administration, they have agreed with him, while on various other occasions, they have been on different sides. The official policy of the administration is to protect the island and the most of its vulnerable population group, which are called as PVTGs. And the policy is very firmly placed, but there are a certain degree of commitments to physically preserve the population, and there remains a persistent lack of understanding of the Andamanis as thinking human beings. So what is exactly the issue? The Professor Vishwajit, he has highlighted that the natives of this place, they live a hunting and gathering type of life. So over the years, the various government officials, they have asked these questions to Professor Vishwajit, that what could be done to make the Ongi and the Jarawa settle in one place within their allocated reserves instead of running around hunting and gathering. So, and then he comes to the answer, that what is the answer to this question? Why is it that they don't want to settle in one place? And he says that settling down in one place here would mean that turning them from hunting and gathering type of communities, hunting and gathering types of tribes to settled cultivators. So that is fine. So what is wrong in settled cultivator? Over the period of history, we have seen that how various tribal groups, how various sections of the population, they have converted themselves from hunting and gathering to settled cultivator, and this is how the society, how the civilization they have progressed. And at the same time, he also found that the native people, they are reluctant to this kind of work which is being provided by the administrator. So when Professor Vishwajit, he was working among the Angis in the early 1980s, he was struck by their persistent sense of discomfort about the work which was envisaged for them by the administrator. On the surface, it might seem that they do not like the routine work and they seem it futile and meaningless, very mechanical. But the more longer Professor Vishwajit stayed with them, the more conversation he had with them, it gave him more revelations. And then he found that the dislike for the work was not instinctive, but the dislike for the work was rooted in the belief that such kind of work which is related to the plantation or social forestry or horticulture or rudimentary agriculture, all of them, all these kinds of work, they are premised upon the disruption and reshaping of the forest. So the disruption was understood, it was not understood merely as cleaning or deforestation in a physical sense, but it was disruption of a vital set of relationships that would be destroying, that would be destroyed with the replacement of existing trees with new species or new modes of cultivation of the forest. So that was the major issue, that the existing trees would be destroyed and some new forms of other trees would come and new modes of cultivation would emerge. So when I was reading this paper, so I was thinking that, okay, then what is the issue with that? If trees are being cut, so new trees are coming, so there will be a balance. But then when I read further, I got the answer. And it was very clear. And Professor Vishwajit, he argues that in the worldview of the Ongis and Jarawa, most of the administration demarcation of the forest area and deforested or settled areas are not culturally separate. They are part of the continuum that has been disrupted by the administrative and social barriers. So Professor Vishwajit, he has highlighted 5 strands, and on the basis of these 5 strands, he has shaped his entire article. And these are the 5 strands. I don't know the exact pronunciation. I have tried to make sense of it. For the convenience of everyone, I have put them in the chat box. So you can read from there what exactly when Inaya Kutata. So I don't know whether it is pronunciated like that or it is pronunciated in some other meaning. Please forgive my ignorance for this. So these are the 5 strands. Inaya Kutata, Machekwe, Tukwe, Galako, Toti, Hadang, and Loloki. And on the basis of these 5, he has tried to make sense of the worldview of these 2 tribes. So starting from the first, Ine Kutata, that is the forest collective. What exactly is it and how it is related to the worldview of the tribal population? In their shared myth of origin, both Jorawa and Ongi tribe, they see themselves as descendants from the plants or trees. So they understand themselves that we have descended from the plants, we have descended from the tree. And this idea is completely different from the idea of being evolved or from being related to animals or heavenly or divine bodies. So they consider themselves as not evolved from these bodies, but they are directly descendant of the trees. And both these Ogis and Jarawas, they have conceptualized relationships within the natural and human world as homologous. Just as they see themselves as human collective or community, they see all the plants and trees in forest forming a forest community or a collectivity formed by interrelation, which are referred to as Ine Kutata. So anchored within this concept of Ine Kutata, each plant, though they are found in particular part of the forest, but this plant is related to all the plants which are there within the forest. Upon death of all plants, like animals, human beings, they become related to spirits and that remain invisible, but the spirit, it can be felt. According to both the groups, living human beings, they have a consanguineal relationships with the spirits, but upon death, all plants, animals, and humans, they have an affinal relationships with the spirit. So the relationship between humans and plants thus begins in life and continues even after death. So the Ine Kutata is founded on the idea that the forest is a sentient being. This is one of the reasons why both these tribes, they believe that forest has an autonomous life of its own and that should not be disrupted. Both human and non-human trees, in non-humans he has included trees and plants, as well as the spirits, they can respond to and they have an impact on each other. The relations between them are mutually interdependent and this is what sustains them as an Ine Kutata or as a collective. The Jarawas, they also look at all the plants and trees as a community, which is of different age sets. They understand that the bushes, the shrubs, the young trees, they all have the potential of becoming full-grown members of the forest. But each of them, they needs the other to grow and sustain themselves. So the shrubs, they become a bush, and if the bush succeeds to thrive in the forest space, it can itself become a tree or serve to nurture one. All the shrubs, bushes, trees are communities that live in the forest, just like the Jarawa population it lives. The Jarawa population, it includes the elders, the teenagers, the children, all of them, they exist in the forest, just like this. All these various plants, the trees, the shrubs, the bushes, they are co-living, cohabiting. The forest or the non-human plant community, it embodies, I'm quoting Professor Vishwajit, they embody the human community's social relationship in that it remains entangled in relationship with spirit on the one hand and the species member on the other. This is what makes the Ongi see the forest or the individual trees within an extended kin with whom it is both possible and imperative to talk. The act of talking with the trees is not always ritualized. It is habitual and it is considered as part of socialization of the community. Trees are meant to offer emotional refuge. It is thus not unusual for an angry Ongi child or an adult to reach out to a tree and vent their feelings. Talking to a tree induces calm and evokes a sense of reassurance of being loved and attached to all living things in forest. It is this emotional affinity with plants that reinforces feelings of connectedness with Inekutata. Yet, even after all this thing, the fear of disruption, it remains a continuous threat to both the communities. Disruption here means a particular condition that constrains or even destroys the possibility of perpetuation of the life of the forest as it is constituted by its endemic species. The argument for the sustenance of the integrity of the forest is related to larger cosmology of the interdependence, which is bound up in an understanding of the relationship in life, death, and rebirth. So the Ongi, they believe human, animals, and plants on dying are born again by entering the spirit of the related human, animal, and plant spirits. So spirits, they emerge from the interior of a dead body. So on death of the spirit or the essence, whatever we call it, the essence of the plant or the spirit of the plant or spirit of a human, it escapes from one body and then it enters into another identical species. So Professor Vishwajit, he writes that, however, if this spirit does not find an appropriate body or reside in them, then death does not lead to any replenishment or regeneration. It leads to irreversible depletion or void. The logical extension of this argument is that if plantations or horticulture or even deforestation result in the destruction and replacement of existing family of trees, the ones remaining would fall silent. So this gives the answer that why they are not accepting even the new trees to be planted, because there is something which is very sacrosanct, and if the original plants they are destroyed, then there is no way for the spirits or the essence to go and enter into other bodies. So it will completely destroy their cultural aspect. So this would be a forest. So then what will happen? They will have a forest where no trees can talk. It is only in forest where all living species are related to the spirit of a species that can talk to one another. So disembodied souls, they are potentially degenerated by their abilities to enter another body in spirit form. This transformed spirit residing in new body ensures regrowth, regeneration of that living specific form. In the case of trees, death marks the same departure of the spirit, but here the tree spirit can only enter the body of the tree of the same species. So there has to be a similar species or the same species, otherwise everything will be futile. Unlike humans and animal spirits that can transform into a spirit, transform into any animal or any plant, the plant spirit can only reside in the same species of the plant in order to regenerate or perpetuate life. So with the loss of a tree, its family becomes dependent on the availability of similar tree for its spirit to reside in. With agriculture, horticulture, or plantation there, and the depletion of forests that come with these acts of interventions, tree souls remain without a container and this leads to an inevitable decline of the forest. So plants and humans as an inekutata or collectivity can coexist and mutually sustain their world or set in a course of entropy by affecting the circulation of spirit. Anything that disrupts this circulation of spirit, it depletes the possibility of both human and non-human life in this forest. Connected to this aspect, we have another aspect of Gaya Barota, that is, our forests are our common ancestors. So there are various different versions of how human beings they have come into being, or how these forests they have come into being. The Gaya Barota, to begin with, was in mythical times. It was an empty blank space, and according to various legends, there was an interaction between the animals and the natural phenomena, which resulted in the slow and gradual birth of different forms of life, including plants, humans, animals, and other forest creatures. In the course of time, the empty space of the Gaya Barota filled up, and each form of life supported the other to survive and grow. And this is where he quotes one interesting legend which he found during his fieldwork. He argues that long ago, when spirits got angry, it rained so much that all island was submerged under rainwater. As the water kept rising, some plants decided to raise themselves to breathe, thus forming the first mangrove forest. Trees that struggled to rise above the ebbs and flows of mud and water soon came to acquire buttress that gave them strength to grow above all other trees. Traps at the mangroves were requested by trees and other forest creatures to make more soil for their submerged islands. Soon the forest floor was covered with mushrooms and fungus. So the entire forest became arranged in a way that saw all the tall trees with strong buttress in the interiors of the forest and submerged trees with their roots sticking over the ground close to the water where tides ebbed and flowed in daily rhythm. So on the island, trees started growing abundantly, and when trees became older, they died and fell. But at the very place they fell, life would begin anew with small plants starting sprouting from the thick layers of the decaying leaves and wood of the dead tree. Thus the forest grew and spread, and trees fell, died, and grew again in a constant cycle of death and rebirth. Initially, Professor Vishwajit argues that it seemed to him that all this was part of a ritual associated with the sustaining of the identity of a particular group. But in the later conversation, he found that the larger significance of this was revealed to him in terms of both Ongi's myth of a plant ancestry and the implication of this had on the understanding of their roles as both children and custodian of the forest. So according to both Ongi's and Jarawa myths, humans and plants, they were born out of tree that grew through the sea, earth, and sky. But even as they were born out of common ancestor, there was something that was distinguishable from plants and animals. And this thing was capacity to move, mobility. Human beings, they had mobility. They had capacity to move, which plants and other species didn't have. So mobility was a power. It was granted by the ancestral tree to humans in return for a promise that humans will not interfere with plants growing in forest. Mobility within the forest also had another important meaning. To move did not mean to move away. Rather, movement was tied to the imperative to stay connected. So plants are tied to the soil and constrained to move, but they are all interconnected under the soil throughout the entire forest. Both Ongis and Jarawas believe that the roots of various plants, they are bound to each other through conversation. The idea of connectedness through communication and interdependence is also invoked when Ongi spoke of their own relationship with each other and among different other bands, different other groups. So Ongis, they see the root network under the forest as representing a relationship of family. This is homologous to the relation of mutuality their own band share with another band. But even as they see the homologies and the relationship between plants, animals, both Ongis and Jarawa, they are keenly aware of the one crucial difference that separates them from the plants, which we have already. So there's a capacity to move. So they see how plants do not walk around, but they are scattered or spread their younger ones all around. That's how they propagate life. Humans, on the other hand, have to move around and carry their young wherever they go to sustain life. If we stay in one place, we would lose their capacity to move, hunt, and gather. So that is another reason why they don't want to settle for cultivation. How would we live? As a young Jarawa man told the professor, like the villagers, if we choose to live in one place, we will start growing roots. So this is something which leads to their repulsion of cultivation. Both Ongis and Jarawa, they understand that the longer implication of work which is related to cultivation. Cultivation means to settle in one place and nurture a field, garden, or plantation. To settle in one place means the loss of freedom to move within the forest. And the loss of mobility means alienation from the forest. And alienation from the forest means limiting the possibilities of life within it. Members of both communities are aware of the historical past when the forest was large and well spread, and there were far greater number of fellow community members. As more and more outsiders started coming in and settling down by clearing vast areas of the primary forest of Ongis and Jarawas, they realized the loss and degradation it has caused. Yet, both the communities, they are able to draw a clear connection between the arrival of settler and the growing assault on the integrity of the forest. The notion of the settlers as outsider is connected to the new trees and crops that are introduced in the forest by these outsiders. These new plants are deemed outsiders too. There is an implicit sense of similarity between endogamous and exogamous plant clusters and human groups. The sense of sustaining endogamy within the forest remains a compelling idea because both communities regard themselves as descendant of a mythical tree. Ongi and Jarawa both are related to all the plants that grow in the forest. Elders from both communities of Ongi and Jarawa, they argue that their forests have undergone irreversible change because of the arrival and presence of the outsiders. And this is where the other aspect, the ancestors and ancestor being a guardian, it comes. The Machekwe and Tukwe Galak. So from the Java and Ongi point of view, only sentinels continue to live on an isolated island. They are unique as no outsider has disturbed them or their original forest. Sentinels remain violent and hostile to outsiders. The forest is magically charged because many of the spirits who originate from it, they reside in the same island. Closely linked to the idea of Irekuta or the forest collective and the bond of kinship that binds plants and humans is the specific identification of a plant ancestor or Tukwe Galoka. This is what it is termed as, or it is also termed as Gurjan or the guardian or the ancestor of this particular plant. There is another story which is associated with this plant, which Professor Vishwajit has highlighted. He argues that one day a large piece of bamboo floated on the eastern shoreline, and due to intense sunlight, it cracked open, and from it emerged two women. On bursting out of the bamboo shaft, the two bamboo daughters complained to their bamboo father, who was almost at the verge of dying because of dehydration. They complained that they were lonely and needed company. To this, the bamboo father assured his daughters that upon his death, two new young boys would emerge from his body. These were the twin trees of tall and strong ancestor trees, which knew the forest well and could foretell the arrival of the rain and wind and blew throughout it. The two bamboo sisters then married to these two brothers. From this union of sisters and brothers, the first humans were born and were taught to live in the forest.
Judge, if I can interrupt, you have 5 minutes to wind up the.
Yeah, okay, I'll try to wind up in this.
Yes, thank you.
So these children of this ancestor tree, they survived as like their grandparents, and they were endowed with quality of knowing about rainfall. A full, mature ancestor tree would become a bearer of all the knowledge of all the forest and would inform all living beings who are living in this forest about advancing seasonal winds and rains and could withstand strong winds. And this is what made possible for all the plants to have rainwater for drinking. Once the forest started thriving, all plants had the company of insects and birds around them. Now plants were never lonely. They could constantly listen to the sounds made by birds and insects, making them aware of seasonal changes in each part of the forest space. So all the plants would bloom, have fruits, and get rid of old leaves. As plants alone are incapable of to move, they depend on insects and birds to tell them about the seasonal changes. So now these trees, they are being felled. So felling of these ancestral trees is being done because of the commercial purpose, and this has been done since the British time, since the late 19th century. So another important thing about these trees is that they are the talking trees. They are a conversation between human and plant world, and they are sustained through ceaseless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And with this, I come to the last aspect, that is Toti, the second last, that is Toti Hodong. So Toti Hodong is an extension of the respect which these people, they have for the ancestral tree. So acknowledging the significance of the ancestral tree, Jarawa, they make sure that their bit of the forest is not disturbed by the introduction of plants from outside. For them, respecting and conserving the integrity of the forest is a gesture of reciprocity for the help of the ancestral tree. And this ancestral tree is providing its help to all the life forms in the forest. The anxiety about the integrity of the forest and the fear of exogamous trees entering into the forest, it stems from the larger understanding of the significance of the ancestral tree to both the community and to the outsiders. And with this, the last aspect, that is Loloki. Loloki means the disturbance and the disasters. So during his fieldwork with both the communities, it appeared to the author that the repeated acts of refusals were like acts of certain kind of civil disobedience against the state authority. He had observed that both Jarawa and the Ongi, they subtly disobey to take orders of taking up any kind of work that involved digging the soil and clearing of the land within the forest. These acts of disobedience, they originate not from any kind of habitual gestures of resistance to enforced work. For both the Jarawa and Ongi, the forest is conceived as a society, which is made up of complex interrelationship of plants and humans bound together in the forest through ties of kinship and communication. The introduction of outsiders to the plants, outsiders and the plants in the forest inevitably leads to the erosion and eventual breakdown of Inakutata, or the collective life of the forest. According to the Ongi belief, the forest is not to be disturbed in any way, as it would cause the tumbling down one by one of all plants and trees bound by the ties of Mijejule. So Ongi visualize their world in which they live within the forest around them as an extension of the forest above the sky and under the earth in the watery abyss. Any activity that alters this primordial relational network of forest on the earth, above the sky, and under the sea by humans is a harbinger of destruction, or Loloki, and the primary cause of disaster and loss experienced by islanders. Earthquakes, tsunamis, excess of rain or lack of rain are all regarded as manifestation of Loloki, which is caused by the forest alterations. So for Ongi and Jarawa, the world is based on a network of intimate relationship that maintain the balance of life of humans and non-humans. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj. Just in time for the 30 minutes that were allocated to your paper, Professor Pandya's paper. So I have already mentioned in the chat box, anybody who has any questions, please type them in the chat box and we will share it with Professor Pandya over email, I guess. For the benefit of our listeners and the audience who are present here for this session, the 30 minutes that Neeraj has spent reading out Professor Pandya's paper has some very significant points and themes that emerged. So as a chair of the session, I'm going to just quickly give you a summary of those. Most striking features of his entire work is that it's very rich in ethnographic description. So the sociologist or the social anthropologist in me couldn't help but notice the narratives from the fields, the stories from the fields that he's constantly bringing to his field, which actually brings alive the scientific knowledge that we are trying to create and the anthropological and sociological knowledge that we try to create through our works. So that's like more about the work in general and the fascinating feature of it. Second is, of course, he's highlighted the idea of how the world of the natives is sometimes different from, not sometimes, most of the times, different from the way we understand it from a very modern statist paradigm. So the worldview, which he's highlighted in terms of the Hey.
I think something
Hi,
happened.
Neeraj.
Yeah, yes, I think
Yes,
something happened.
now
That's
I've
right.
managed.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know which point people could hear me. Anyway, so quickly, the first point was to look at how the worldview of the natives is created, and sometimes it is not so much in line with what the modern status paradigm would want us to look at. That's the first point. So the life world of the people, the life world of the community under study, in this case, the Onjis and the Jaravas. That has to be seen from a different perspective. We need to unlearn a lot of things that we know and we take for granted. The second point is, of course, the relationship that we have with lands and forests, the space that is created, the space that is, which is a much more spiritual, socio-cultural space, which allows these communities to look at forest as a way of, not just something that exists outside of you. So it's pretty much a part of how you internalize the externality that you have, and what internal ideas and thought processes and values and beliefs that you have gets externalized in your relationship with the forest. So it gives you a sense of the socio-cultural, spiritual world that the Onjis and the Jaravas are looking at. The material life in itself is seen very differently. So we need to know that it's not a separate compartmentalized sort of world and worldview that we are used to exist amongst the Onji and Jarava. It's very different. And lastly, of course, I think what could be taken from this entire talk, there's a lot more, of course, in terms of the cosmological aspect of the Onjis and the Jaravas. But the fact that their entire economic and political life in itself is also constructed around their socio-cultural spiritual world. So this is a very rich anthropological and ethnographic study that we just listened to, which gets us to look at how we have a world which is much more connected, much more collective, where birth and death and life kind of happens in between. And all of that is not seen as compartmentalized. So that's the summary. If I've missed out anything, of course, you can write to Professor Pandya for clarifications. We have Lavanya, who's raised her hand. Could you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Lavanya, can you hear me?
Maybe by mistake.
Okay, maybe. There's also feedback forms here, I think. So the organizers would want you to fill them up. Should I close the interactive session? What do you suggest if there are no questions?
Yes.
Then I can just quickly give the chair's remarks for both the papers, bringing them together for this session. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So let me bring the two papers together. I think the session is titled Man and Nature. So that sort of already outlines what we were supposed to expect in this session. Both the papers gave us one very significant, detailed worldviews of the communities that they worked with. There's a lot of experiential knowledge and phenomenological knowledge that is coming into these papers. As a sociologist and who's also kind of dabbled with ecology, environment, and issues and debates related to it, I think what I'm going to leave our audience here with is that what made me think about, or what I thought was relevant when it comes to the two papers. One is, of course, I think that has already been sort of introduced through two papers, is that we have a very narrow anthropocentric view. We need to transcend that, and we need to bring together the ecocentric view. So both the speakers for today have very clearly highlighted we need to focus on the life world, the worldviews of the natives, the indigenous communities, learn from them, learn from their knowledge systems, to try and develop an attitude that is extremely significant for the kind of world that we live in. If you need to think about preservation, we need to think about conservations. We need to start opening spaces for dialogue and conversations between different spheres, the way we understand it. In their worldview, they don't see it as compartmentalized, really. So the anthropocentric view and the ecocentric view need to have a dialogue with each other, where ecocentric view probably highlights that I need to be more, I need to be prioritized. So this I take from one of the environmental or sociologists, who is John Hannigan. So he has talked a lot about this. The other strand of thought that I've taken from M.M. Bell, I think that's again useful for us, is that when you look at the social organization of any society, and currently if you look at the global world in general, social inequality and power imbalances shapes and are shaped by our attitudes towards nature and other communities. Specifically, the way we use the concepts of natives or indigenous or tribal communities, the very way in which we use them and we see them as separate needs to be revisited, and also tell us the power imbalances within the knowledge systems and the cognitive systems that we are part of. That probably is also a kind of an injustice that we do. So we need to bring back the questions of how epistemes really work in the way we understand ecology and our attitude towards ecology. And the last one that I think I'm going to highlight is the very idea of Ulrich Beck's, looking at how modernity needs to be critically engaged with. We have the very project of modernity has had its problems, and we have tried to rework, we have tried to engage with it, we have tried to be critical of it, we have tried to be reflexive of it, but I think we still feel short of really taking it on like a big project. So he says that you start looking at social, movement from a scientific rationality or social rationality, which gives you an understanding of how cultural worlds work. We can move beyond that. We can think of ecological rationality as something that allows us to make sense of the world that we live in. But instead of seeing them as an evolutionary scale where it says that scientific to social to ecological, I would suggest that we look at them as overlapping spheres where science needs to have, again, a dialogue with ecology. Ecology needs to have a dialogue with socio-cultural frameworks. And that will probably give us a much broader, comprehensive, robust framework that will help us understand the relationship between man and nature and the way it has evolved over time. So with these comments, I'm going to close this session from my side and hand it over to the organizers. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much for giving me this space to interact with the two papers. In one case, of course, Mr. Madhu himself, and the other paper, and it was truly a delight. Thank you.
Just a quick, Rashi, thank you so much. Good to see you. Good to see you.
I can't see you, but good to hear you.
Yeah. Thanks once again. So over to Neeraj.
Yeah, thank you, Anu. So that was the second, I presented it. It was a very long paper, and especially since he was not well, his wife, she sent the paper to me and then told me that this is the situation. So I tried my best to summarize it within the time frame which we were supposed to have. So with this, we are coming to at the end of this session. So we already said thank you, but I think when conversations like this, it becomes very, very formal when we are having a certain kind of informal conversation and suddenly the formalities come. But then we have certain protocols, certain conventions are there. So I'm taking this opportunity that on behalf of Center for Research Maitri College, I, along with my colleague and fellow session coordinator, Dr. Anvita Jalan. I thank the chair of the session for taking out time from her busy schedule and giving her inputs about the two presentations and the final remarks as chair. I also thank both the presenters, Mr. Madhu and other presenter who could not come, but they sent their people to us. At the same time, I'm also thankful to all the students who joined. I requested some of the students personally, and I can see that they have really joined. So I'm really thankful to your students. Thank you so much. Along with these, my fellow colleagues and the other organizers, thank you for joining the session, and the technical team for making all the arrangements. So with this, we call it a day for this session. Thank you. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So, Neeraj, maybe you would like to make the announcement for the next session, because we have another session at 3:30.
Yeah. So another this is one thing, and one other thing is that we have a feedback form which has been circulated in the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback form, and the next session will be at 3:30. So same link will be used for that session. So we have the speaker, Ms. Swati Dave, CEO of the Institute of Advancement of Vedic Mathematics, London, UK. So please, students, please join at 3:30. So now you can have your lunch, chai, or whatever you like to have, and then please join us back at 3:30.
Maybe you can join at 3:15. So if you all can log in at 3:15, it would be better, because we don't want to keep the speaker waiting. And it would be a very interesting session. So thank you once again for joining in.